Okay, I think we're here and ready to resume. So do we have the closed meeting certification motion?
Yes, I move that this council certify by a recorded vote that to the best of each council member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from the open meeting requirements of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act and identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered in the closed meeting.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, guys, just raise your hand, I guess, is sufficient for this?
We can vote, yeah.
Huh?
We can do the buttons.
Okay, buttons? Fine, 5-0. I'm reading my script, and there we go. All right, so we're going to start again with the 6:30 business session. Let's have a brief moment of silence, please. Thank you. Councilors, any announcements?
I do have one. This Saturday at Mount Zion First African Baptist Church, there will be a conversation for cancer for men, and it's called Stay in the Game, and it's from 9 to 11, and Dr. Tracy Downs will be there. There's going to be a panel. I'll be speaking on that panel as well as David Simmons and Alvin Edwards, Reverend Dr. Edwards. So I think that it's a really good opportunity to come out for men to learn about some of the information about prostate cancer. And there's going to be breakfast, conversation, they're going to have some raffles for some tickets. But I think that this come out to get some information on, I think will be really helpful. Let's see if there is a number to call, 434-243-4052. That's 434-243-4052.
I think we'll also take a moment to have a couple of acknowledgments. And one, this past weekend, we had the finals of the Tonsler Basketball League. People who follow the doings over Tonsler know that it was a very successful year this year and a great event. We've had a lot of good back-to-school events in the last few days. Charlottesville students go back to school later on this week. And I know that I've been getting a lot of calls and a lot of emails about things like school buses and how are we going to fix this problem. And all I can say is that's what our city manager's got to work on. So it's not my job. Hey, you know, they tell us early on, we're just the legislators, we're not the administrators. Okay, and we also, since we were last year, the Soul of Seaville event went forward very nicely last weekend, or 2 weekends ago, I guess, at this point, with a lot of success. And of course, UVA is back in session. And Charlottesville at the end of August is a very different place from Charlottesville in the beginning of August. So it's shaping up to be a busy time. Any other recognitions, proclamations? If not, Ms. Thomas, would you read the consent agenda, please?
Okay. Consent agenda, number 4, minutes, July 13th, Joint Planning Commission City Council Work Session, July 20th, special meeting. 5, resolution, a minor amendment to the Home FY 2023 to 2024 action plan to reprogram unspent home funds from prior years to support energy efficiency, home rehabilitations through the Local Energy Alliance Program, LEAP, approximately $111,749, one reading, and there are 2 resolutions with that. 6, resolution, a resolution to appropriate funds from the Department of Housing and Community Development, Virginia Homeless Solutions Program Grant, $539,369, one of 2 readings. 7, resolution to appropriate funds from the Department of Criminal Justice Systems Free Grant School Security Officer, School Resource Officer Incentive Grant Program, $150,000, one of 2 readings. 8, resolution to appropriate funds from the Safe Routes to School Non-Infrastructure Grant, $33,150, one of two readings.
Okay. Thank you. We'll now take public comment regarding items on that consent agenda that just read by the clerk. Each speaker will have up to 3 minutes. In the Zoom webinar, you may select the raise hand option to be placed in the speaker queue. In a Zoom webinar, let's see, raise hand. Okay, if you've joined by phone and wish to speak on the consent agenda, you may press *9. We'll alternate in-person and virtual speakers. And this is not, if you've pre-signed up, if you pre-registered, this is not your time yet. Is there anybody who would like to speak on the consent agenda, those 5 items just read by the clerk? Anybody here? Anybody online who would like to address the council on the consent agenda?
Mayor Snook, I see no raised hands.
All right. Is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
I move for adoption of the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Please cast your vote. All right, that passes 5-0. Mr. Sanders, is there a report from the city manager's office?
Yes, sir, there is. Going to start with Stephen Hicks, our new interim deputy city manager for operations. I promised you all that he would get a chance to speak, so today's that day.
Good evening, Mayor and council members and city manager. I have a few updates. First, the neighborhood development services. There's a completed consolidated draft on the Charlottesville Development Code with ordinances. It was posted last week on the Seville Plan Together site. We encourage the public to access the document there. There's 400 pages available. And reminder of the next steps, on the 29th, a joint work session of Planning Commission and Council will have a staff review adoption process. And then on September 14th, Planning Commission public hearing. In regards to Public Works, Public Service has been working on their annual projects to support the start of school. This past Friday, we completed a temporary sidewalk conversion after a retaining wall issue took a portion of the sidewalk out of the service. I want to thank the Public Works Service staff for that. And then transit, regarding the school buses, the leadership team is continuing to work with the school leadership team as we start school this week. On Wednesday, we're expecting 14 school bus routes to be activated and 3 van routes, with additional 6 potential employees as soon as we get them on board and trained. We hope to have all 20 driver slots filled by September or early October. As for utilities, the decarbonization study is in progress, and we expect a report from the consultant in October. This will be a preliminary report, and we should hear the planned completion date at the time as well. The study is being conducted by an outside consultant. We'll evaluate the multiple pathways that include fee structure, energy efficiency programs, electrification, carbon offsets, renewable, and certified natural and hydrogen. The study will also complete a legal review of the discontinuing of natural gas operations and new connections. An update on the study will be presented to council October 2023. The report finalized in February of 24. The information was conveyed to the utility rate report presentations on June 5th. That's my update, and I would like to share with council, I do look forward in my new role in this journey I have, and I look forward to working with the citizens and staff. And Mr. City Manager, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, sir. I do have a few additional items, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to issue a congratulations to the regional developers, the nonprofits that recently were notified of over $10 million in affordable and special needs housing funding that has come to the city and the county. And I was also proud, and hope you will join me in being proud, that in addition to that $10 million, $13.9 million was awarded to those same groups by this body, by this organization. So just to see $23 million being deployed in our area for affordable housing is an amazing thing, something we should all be proud of.
Thank you.
I'm happy to report that I extended an offer to our next Director of Communications and Public Engagement. The candidate has accepted. Once we get through pre-employment screening, I will make the announcement of who that person is, and we look forward to also advising when that start date is. So that's going to be a great addition to our team. My social calendar is building left and right these days. I was able to join the Charlottesville Albemarle Schools Back to School Bash, which was in partnership with Hot 1019 and the African American Pastors Council on Saturday. It's a great event, first time being able to see that action. It brought me back to when I used to do that kind of work myself. Also participated in the Kendallwood celebration. My wife and I walked in the drum line. It brought me back to being in high school. I just needed my clarinet. I would have been able to play along with them, but we walked through the current site and walked over to the new homes where the individuals have started to move back in, which was a great opportunity to see those folks be able to realize the dream and what we all should be striving for, and that is better quality housing for everyone. And then I also attended the Better Together Back to School Bash at the Boys and Girls Club, and that was an amazing moment, being able to see haircuts, hair being braided, bounce houses, food, everything all happening at the same time. Quite amazing. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be a part of that particular activity as well. And then lastly, I just wanted to issue an apology to the public. This is really just something that I felt necessary to do during the August 12th Planning Commission meeting. We had some technical difficulties in CitySpace, and I do apologize for that. And technology is great until it isn't. And while we expected a larger crowd, we underestimated how many people were actually going to show up that night. And we knew we couldn't cancel the meeting. There was just too many people who wanted to speak on some very important issues. So just wanted to take a moment of acknowledgement of that was not our best moment, which is why we're back in this room. All Planning Commission and council meetings will be back in this room, and we'll use CitySpace as our overflow. But I just wanted to acknowledge that as just one of those things that we will always strive to do better, and whenever we mess up, we'll own it and we'll do better. So thank you for that opportunity to do that. Mr. Mayor, that's the end of my report.
And so I note that there's a quarterly financial report. Is that going to be something that's discussed here, or is it simply a part of the packet?
That's just a part of the packet. That is just the revenue projections from the treasurer. We gave you the report before Mr. Rogers, his term ended in last month. So we were just giving you the additional details. So if there are questions, we'll be able to allow you to bring those up to us at some other time.
Okay.
But going forward, we'll make sure that it's the complete package of both parts of the presentation at once.
Okay. All right, so now we come to the Community Matters portion. We have 8 pre-registered speakers, leaving 8 slots for additional speakers on Community Matters. Each speaker will have up to 3 minutes to speak. If one of the first 8 speakers is unavailable, we'll move up somebody from the wait list. We'll now open the floor to pre-registered speakers. Our first pre-registered speaker is Joni Freeman.
You get all of us. Is this on?
It's on. You have 3 minutes.
All right. The Green Grannies have been around for 10 years, and we've been singing to educate the community and push the council in the right direction. Given all of the climate disruptions that have been taking place this summer, we really urge you to decide in favor of electrifying CAT, our city buses. And here we go with our granny style. It's all about the bus, about the bus, about the bus. Electrify the bus in Charlottesville. Ride to work, to the store and school. Electric buses sure are cool. Oh, it's all about the bus, about the bus, about the bus. Electrify the bus in Charlottesville. We'll save money on gas, that's for sure. So carbon is gone and the air is pure. Oh, it's all about the bus, about the bus, about the bus. Electrify the bus in Charlottesville. We need to set the stage and forward ahead. Everybody knows that the fuels are dead. It's all about the bus, about the bus, about the bus. Electrify the bus in Charlottesville. So tell your city councilors and all your friends, plug into the future, and the message is sent. It's all about the bus, about the bus, about the bus. Electrify the bus in Charlottesville.
Thank you, Green Grannies. And I note that the next, is Marge Thompson,
I'm ready.
do you have something else?
Get in? No, she
Okay.
signed up.
Okay, I noticed that, and Sarah Peasley, yeah, okay. Well, thank you very much. The next speaker is William Espinoza. Is he here?
Yes,
Okay. Keeping with the theme, but
keeping with the theme, but you do not want me to sing. My name's Bill Espinoza. I live at 208 Colshurst Drive, and it is in the county, but not far from the city line. And as you all know, the CAT serves the county and the city, and the county and the city support it financially. I understand that there's serious consideration being given to acquiring compressed natural gas CNG buses. I want to say I'm not a scientist, but both in my upbringing and in my professional career as a lawyer, I've been close to both the fossil fuel and energy industries. In my view, in the past, the fossil fuel industry brought great gifts to our modern world. Unfortunately, much of what it now brings is deception and misinformation. Part of that pattern is its marketing of methane as natural gas and as a clean fuel. Natural gas is 90% methane, a hydrocarbon that has 25 times the heat trapping capacity of CO2. Because CNG vehicles emit methane, they're only marginally better for the climate than diesel. Additionally, there's the extraction, storage, and delivery of methane, which adds to the greenhouse effect. I doubt that the city could possibly meet its climate goals if it locks into CNG transport for the coming decades. Moreover, emissions from methane-powered vehicles have serious health consequences, particularly for those who ride the buses or live near the bus routes. As a recent European study noted, quote, CNG vehicles emit especially large numbers of ultrafine particles that could be the most harmful to human health, as they have been shown to penetrate deep into the body and have even been linked to increased risk of brain cancer. Additionally, CNG vehicles emit large amounts of ammonia, which significantly increases the rate of health-damaging particle formation, similar to what we call smog. My ask of all of you is that you please take the time to thoroughly inform yourself about this decision. It will have long-term consequences, not just for us who are here in this room and living now in this region, but for the next generation as well. There are better alternatives, particularly battery electric buses. Thank you for your attention.
thank you, Mr. Espinoza. Next, we have Brett Jones. Mr. Jones here? Yes, okay.
Glad I don't have to follow the green grannies. All right. Thank you, Council. Good evening. My name is Brett Jones. I'm from Charlottesville and Cottage Lane. And if you were like me and you woke up Friday morning and opened up the Washington Post homepage, you saw this message here that greeted you. American democracy is cracking. And these forces help explain why. It was a long article. It painted a pretty bleak picture. If you're wondering how we're doing, it's bad against international other democracies, bad, historically bad. And to rub salt in the wounds, it points out that there are many deep structural reasons causing the loss of trust. This was just a straight up reporting piece. It didn't offer any ideas or hope for change. It was just a picture of total deadlock, and we've all seen dozens of articles like this. It's enough to make you want to throw your hands up and walk away. But allow me to give you another way to look at it. This book here, The Politics Industry by Galen Porter, was recommended to me by Charlottesville's own Dr. Cameron Webb when he was running for House in 2020. And if you've ever talked to Dr. Webb, you're probably not surprised if I told you that this book is very hopeful. The whole second half of this book is about political innovations. He lays out a plan forward, which, for the lack of time, I'll just paraphrase two main points on. The first point is that our single biggest lever to change our system, to rescue our system, is to change the way that we do our voting. Ranked choice voting does this. It elects candidates with majority support. It lets voters vote their hearts instead of gaming the system. I have a whole spiel for this, but I don't have time. But I will say that ranked choice voting is not a silver bullet. It won't cure every ill, but it's one of the ideas that we have. There are a lot of ideas we have that are impactful, but just not possible. Thinking about you, Electoral College. So ranked choice voting is one of the few items that we have that is impactful and is actually possible. The second point that they make in this is they say, in our federal system, the states are laboratories of democracy. They give a great history lesson, and many of the progressive battles of the 20th century were won in the states, not in Washington. So if you take one state at a time, before you know it, you have 6, 8, 10 states, you have a critical mass, you have a fulcrum, you can change the country that way. So if the states are the laboratories of democracy, this is where we have an opportunity to lead. Right now, we're on the front lines. And the shift to ranked choice voting in the states is already underway. In Maine and Alaska, we've already seen leaders putting country before party. And in Virginia, our state has punted down to the localities. That means the front line is actually right in this room. Virginia has a great opportunity for the country. We're on the national stage every 4 years. We can demonstrate the power of ranked choice voting and what it does for our citizens. So Charlottesville, please, let's commit to playing our part in the long, slow work of moving democracy forward. Let's change the structure. Let's change the patterns. Let's build back trust. Let's change our American democracy. And let's lead from this room. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Katie Van Langen. Is Katie here or online?
She's joining by Zoom.
Great. Ms. Van Langen, you have 3 minutes.
Great. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. I'm Katie Van Langen. I'm the co-director for the Local Energy Alliance program, LEAP. We are a nonprofit located on Ridge Street in Charlottesville. LEAP helps folks make their homes more energy efficient through weatherization. And of course, a big part of that is also renewable energy. We partner with the city to run an annual program called Solarize Virginia that makes going solar easier and more affordable for residents. We hear all the time from homeowners that they don't know who to trust or what questions to ask when they're thinking about putting solar on their home. So LEAP can serve as that trusted partner. Through Solarize, we also connect participants with discounted pricing from vetted installers. Since our program first launched in 2014, over 1,000 homes throughout the state have installed solar through our program. 133 of them have been in the Charlottesville-Albemarle area. Solarize is a great way for community members to take part in helping the city reach their community climate goals. And it also helps folks save money on their electric bill, which is great for everyone. Our 2023 program kicked off in early June, and signups closed at the end of this month. So I'm joining the meeting today to remind folks that there are just 2 weeks left to sign up for our 2023 program at Solarize Virginia. So when folks sign up, they will get a free solar assessment, and it's no cost, no obligation. We just want to help community members out. We also have a recording of our Solarize information session posted on our website, again, solarizeva.org, for folks that just want a little bit more information about going solar. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Van Langen. Next, we have Karen Katz. I think she's online.
I'm having some difficulty figuring out how to get on. Can
You're
you hear
on.
me?
We can hear you.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you so much for this opportunity to speak with you. On June 20th, I sent a letter and several attachments to each counselor to raise awareness of the threat posed by the Atlantis Tree of Heaven. And I want to thank those who acknowledged the issue. And I've learned a lot about other people in the community who are very much concerned and involved in controlling this invasive species. And I don't want to repeat everything that you already know. I sent you many, many attachments, so no need to do that. But just to summarize that these trees pose a threat to all other trees and shrubs in the environment. They pose a threat to public and private property. They're monstrous creatures that take control, that overwhelm other trees. And in Locust Grove, they are threatening the sidewalk that separates the cliff down to the Ravenna Trail from the community. So I think this is a serious issue. And furthermore, now here on St. Charles Avenue, there is a plan to continue construction of some public infrastructure. And I spoke with one of my neighbors today, and he has agreed to allow the city to have access to his property, but he hasn't heard anything about a plan to deal with these trees first. And if these trees are not controlled, they are likely to multiply by the thousands, and also they are likely to affect the pipes and public infrastructure that is being laid. So I'd like to suggest that the city follow the county's example and perhaps work with them. The county has a group. Well, actually, the county hired an individual to be responsible for invasive species. And this Ms. Wingo has put together monthly invasive species work days where people get involved in working together on this problem. And one thing I forgot to mention here is that I think it is imperative for the city and the county to take the lead in educating the public and leading the public in the proper management of these trees.
Thank you, Ms. Katz. Your time is up.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Nicholas Coe.
Good evening, City Council. Thank you for your time. As a proud resident in a downtown, living on the downtown mall, I'm a former naval officer who served our country, and I stand before you with a deep sense of duty and desire to see our city and our nation thriving. During my time in service, I witnessed sailors from across the nation working together. But after leaving the military, it hurts watching the division and animosity tearing our country apart. Rather than fighting amongst ourselves, we should be united in tackling the real challenges our community faces. We need to find a common ground and work together as one people, and ranked choice voting can play a crucial role in making that a reality. By adopting ranked choice voting, Charlottesville ensures a more equitable representation for all its citizens. This system encourages candidates to appeal to a broader base of voters, promoting collaboration and reducing the toxicity often found in our current winner-takes-all approach. Imagine never seeing a negative campaign ad ever again. Also being called instant runoff, we'd avoid ever having to do a runoff election, saving taxpayer dollars, because everyone's preferred representation is documented. It encourages more options for voters, because candidates can run without fear of ever splitting the vote. Lastly, it allows voters to express their true preferences without fear of wasting their vote, fostering a more inclusive democracy that truly represents the will of the people. I understand there may be some current concerns about the technical implementations of implementing ranked choice voting. However, by adopting RCV this year, we have ample time to address and resolve these concerns before 2025. Budget discussions can happen this December for the April approval, giving Ms. Taylor-Yoel and her team the resources and, more importantly, the time to be successful. Local voters want it. I've spent entire Saturday mornings educating hundreds at the Ix Farmers Market on ranked choice voting, and I've witnessed the excitement and hope that ranked choice voting ignites in people. After they hear its benefits, they ask, why haven't we adopted this yet? And often wonder how we can make it happen. Charlottesville has the chance to be a trailblazer, to be the first city in the great state to adopt ranked choice voting in our general elections. Undoubtedly will inspire other communities to follow suit. This is a critical time in our nation's history, and Charlottesville has the opportunity to lead by example. It's our moment to advance democracy that brings us to a more perfect union. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Coe. Now, we had two people on the list who did not need to speak. So we have two on the waiting list, one of whom, Sharon Bayako, may have been one of the Green Grannies.
She was.
Okay. So then we have Cecilia Lapp Stoltzfus.
Good evening, Council. My name is Cecilia Lapp Stoltzfus, and I'm the manager of Food and Agriculture Programs at the International Rescue Committee, our local resettlement agency. And we're located at 375 Greenbrier Drive and work extensively throughout the city. On behalf of over 80 refugee and immigrant gardeners, my colleagues at IRC, and the numerous volunteers and supporters of New Roots, I want to commend Council and the Department of Parks and Recreation for tonight's purchase of Moores Creek Farm. The property is home to the International Rescue Committee's New Roots Farm. A bit of history, IRC launched the New Roots Food and Agriculture Program in 2014, and it swiftly grew into a network of 5 urban agriculture sites seen today, which promote refugee food security and food sovereignty. In 2015, IRC began leasing Moores Creek Farm from the Kaysen family, carrying on the agricultural legacy of a site that offers an accessible location as well as prime soil of statewide agricultural significance. Over the past 9 seasons, 100 New Roots gardeners and their families have farmed on 3.7 acres of that property, stewarding the health of our watershed through sustainable agriculture practices and transforming the site into a vibrant community space. This work has not been without challenges. Specifically, our investment in the property has been hindered by the uncertainty of year-to-year leases over the past decade, as well as historic floods in 2018 that did significant damage to the farm's operations. Thanks to the city's purchase and ongoing commitment to food equity and urban agriculture outlined in the Food Equity Initiative and 2021 Comprehensive Plan, we now have an opportunity to address these challenges in collaboration. Looking ahead, IRC New Roots is excited to engage with the Department of Parks and Recreation to create a plan for the property that supports improvement to the Rivanna Trail network, stream and watershed stewardship priorities, and the preservation of this abundant urban farm built and stewarded by Charlottesville's refugee and immigrant residents. So I just wanted to take this time to thank you all.
Thank you. Okay, we've now gone through our pre-registered speakers. We have 8 more speakers. Let's first see if there's anybody online who would like to speak to us.
Mayor Snook, we have John Hossack.
Mr. Hossack, you're on. Got 3 minutes.
Good evening. I'd like to recommend to pause the rezone. As written, it's not going to work. I think the citizens of Charlottesville and Albemarle are owed some sort of explanation for what is going on in terms of regional collaboration and coordination. From multiple inquiries, I learned that there is no meaningful collaboration. For example, the consultants engaged by Albemarle cannot identify the Charlottesville consultants. Very few in this community currently believe that the county will adopt a plan closely aligned with the current city draft, yet close alignment is called for by your own affordable housing plan on which the entire plan is based. I'll use several quotes from the housing plan. Replicating these land use changes, i.e. soft density by right, within the urban ring will be critical to the success of the city's land use tools by expanding their impacts on the regional housing market. The city should collaborate with Albemarle County to implement zoning and land use changes throughout the urban ring. Critical to success, meaning absent that coordination replication, the plan is destined to fail. And that's because your own document tells us this several times over. You've heard many times about the flaws with the plan, and yet you plow forward. By short-circuiting this coordination, the city sets itself up for a major problem when the county does its plan. If the city doesn't listen to the county's input, what chance is there of the county listening to the city later? What is worse is that the historic pattern is that county development dominates the local region and it places a burden on city residential streets. This is a daily burden in living on these streets and impacts safety, health, quality of life, and even the ability to consider non-car transit, despite the legitimate complaints over many decades. I wish to read into the record some quotes from the housing plan. Charlottesville must collaborate with Albemarle County and other regional jurisdictions, as well as UVA, and other to address housing affordable challenges. Page 23, the recommendations within the Charlottesville Affordable Housing Plan are built with 3 guiding principles in mind: racial equity, regional collaboration, and a focus on a comprehensive approach. Page 26, the urban ring should be a particular focus for regional collaboration and the joint implementation of land use changes, housing development, and housing affordable programs. It is a large area surrounding Charlottesville that includes transit corridors connecting employment centres and has much greater potential to support new housing development than the city. The urban ring is well positioned to help meet the affordable housing needs of the area's low and moderate income households. Thank you for your attention to this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Hossack. Let me turn now to see if there's anybody here in chambers who would like to speak to us. Yes, sir.
Mayor, Council, my name is Philip Jones. I'm here today. It's been 20-some years. My wife didn't want me to come down here. It's been 20-some years, been on my mind and in my heart. So she has passed on, so she don't hear what I got to say tonight. Her cousin, which is my cousin, married to her, was killed in the 9/11, which is 9/11 is coming up in a few days, really. And I was questioning the city whether they would could do a proclamation for Betty Chambers. She's a Betty Fox when she died. She worked at the towers in New York. She worked on the 97th floor. And she was a computer tech. And she was coming down that October to visit us. And when we retired the next year. So I'm just asking the city what they probably could do a proclamation for Betty. She's a graduate of Burley High School. The reason she left Burley High School, just like the rest of the students that graduated from Burley, wasn't a job for them here. So she went to New York and worked. So I would like y'all to take this under consideration.
Tell you what, Ms. Jones, could you send me an email at lsnook@charlottesville.gov?
Okay, hold on.
Take your time.
lsnook@charlottesville.gov and give me some information about that, okay?
Yeah, okay.
And I'll get back to you.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, let's look and see if there's anybody online. Anybody else online?
We have Bob Gibson.
All right, Mr. Gibson?
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Bob Gibson and I live on Chesapeake Street in the Woolen Mills neighborhood and have for the past 40-plus years. I'd just like to say that I'd like to see ranked choice voting in Charlottesville to improve voting options in the city. Charlottesville can and should lead on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson. Okay, next, anybody else here in chambers who would like to speak? Okay, let's go back again. Anybody else online?
We have Robin Hoffman.
Ms. Hoffman, you have 3 minutes.
Hi, everybody. I just have some good news that in 2018, LEAP came into my home and tested my windows and doors, changed every single light bulb to LED, blew insulation into my attic, and as of June of this year, 2023, Dominion installed solar for free because I'm over 60, and my energy bill for July was $7. And the next good thing is that the Mead Park Farmers Market Art Park is a huge hit. Folks have enjoyed the arts and crafts table, and the kids have been interacting with the vendors to create signage at a cost. They actually charge the vendors. And I'm seeing folks feeling less about political or individual differences and more about community engagement. So I'm encouraging, and thank you very much. Ashley Marshall sometimes answers my email on Sunday. I don't know why she's so nice to me, but anyway, I'm very grateful for all the help for getting that park a little bit more shored up. And congratulations, New Roots, and congratulations, David Dillahunt. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hoffman. Anybody else? Again, in person? Back online?
We have Chris Meyer.
Mr. Meyer? If you're talking to us, we can't hear you.
Sorry, buddy. Okay, now?
It's not very good, not a very good line. You want to try again? We'll catch you the next time? Because we really can't hear you.
What?
Let's go to the next person and give Mr. Meyer a chance to call back in.
We have Ziona Bryant.
Ms. Bryant?
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I hope you're doing well. I wanted to speak on two topics. So one, I definitely support ranked choice voting. I think it's great, and I think it gives people the opportunity to kind of vote more along their interests and, particularly the issues that they care about most. So I think that would be a great change for the city, and I would hope that if that change is made, that there's a lot of community engagement and public education about that process so that people can feel comfortable about the change. Additionally, of course, I'm here to say no to the dairy market expansion as proposed and as it was, presented on July 25th. There's been a lot of time spent by myself, other community organizers, the 10th and Page Neighborhood Association, listening to neighbors, hearing their concerns, hearing their thoughts. And I mean, with the countless conversations we've had, I think that there are a lot of concerns about, one, city processes. So, we talked about the lack of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the process, but also just this lack of awareness about how zoning and code and all of those things work and how those changes are made. And so with there being a really important conversation coming up, I've seen those kind of yellow signs about that say the zoning debacle that's coming up. I think that it's important for there to be more, again, community engagement and public education about the process and why it's important and how people can get engaged to make their voices heard. I think that it is a lot to ask people to come to public meetings where they haven't always felt included. So I hope that that's taken into consideration by the Planning Commission and by other offices in the city who are engaged in that process. But again, I say no to the dairy market expansion as proposed and as drawn and presented to the community on July 25th. I was happy to hear that the city manager was paying attention to the issue. And I hope that the councilors are as well and that they're hearing the concerns from the 10th and Page neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bryant. Again, anybody else here? Next person online, is Mr. Meyer back with us?
I do not see Mr. Meyer back on, and there are no additional hands.
All right. Well, Mr. Meyer rejoins us. We always have
Just sent
community.
us an email with his comments.
Oh, okay.
So we have those.
Okay. We'll have to check the email then.
Yeah.
Tell him thank you.
Yes, thank you. So that's our final speaker for Community Matters. There will be another opportunity for public comment at the end of the meeting. We will now move to the action items portion of the agenda. And first is public hearing and ordinance to approve 601 West Main Street land sale. Mr. Engel?
Good evening, councilors. My name is Chris Engel, Director of Economic Development. This next item for you involves a public hearing to consider the sale of a small piece of land that is located at 601 West Main Street. A little bit of the history here is that in 1979, the city purchased this small piece of land, 1,141 approximately square feet, 15 by 70 something. right at the edge of the sidewalk. It's currently landscaped. If you were to drive by there today, that's the piece that we're speaking about. The city purchased it in 1979 from the private property owner and never really did anything with it. As best we can tell, the deeds indicated some type of need for a transportation or road widening improvement. That improvement never actually occurred, so it has remained city property, but the city hasn't been taking care of it. We were approached by the current property owner, which is a different property owner, about a year ago with an offer to purchase the property and pay the current assessed value of the property that he owns, which is adjacent. And that is the offer that's in front of you today. So it's 1,141 square feet. It's a vegetative piece of land. It's essentially unbuildable if somebody were to want to build anything useful on it by itself, just by virtue of its size. The property owner has, as I mentioned, offered the full 2022 assessed value, which is $119,108.99. And they have offered to do the title work as necessary to make the closing happen should council wish to proceed. This is an ordinance. It does require 2 readings and a public hearing. I think that's the overview, unless you have any questions at this time.
Is what Main Street West LLC the business that owns, that is behind it, basically?
That's correct.
So
Yes,
this is a piece of land that's in essence, part of the parking lot.
To most people, it would appear that it belongs to that business. And yes, it's a series of retail and office spaces immediately behind it.
Councilors have any other clarifying questions?
One question. I know this item had come before council before and was denied. Have there been any substantive changes between now and then? And why is this item coming back to us after it was previously denied?
I don't know that it actually came in an official meeting. I think it was discussed previously, but I'm not aware that it actually came and got denied. Unless somebody could correct me on that, but I'm not aware of that.
I remember being aware of the project, but I don't remember it being denied.
It was during your tenure?
Yeah, I remember voting on it, but I may be confabulating that with another land acquisition we voted down. But certainly we were informed of it, and there was a consensus not to support it at a minimum.
Yeah, I walked past it several times. It's the little piece in front of Shenanigans.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, the issue is whether there's anything the city can do with the land. And if not, and if this is the fair market value, I mean, there are 2 consequences. One is we get $119,000 right now, and the other is that we get to add it to the part of the land that is being taxed every year.
Correct. I should also mention that there's a standard review process which city departments get to review, and that process was done here. And nobody could identify any particular need for the property at this moment. You all are certainly aware of the West Main Street project that has been canceled, but as best we can tell, even that had no particular need for this piece of real estate.
There seems to be some suggestion, nobody's really entirely clear, that maybe it had been intended as a bus stop or some sort of it's a transit-related improvement. I take it that discussion has been had with CAT, and nobody is willing to step up and say, yes, we have a use for it.
That's correct.
Yeah, and I'm aware that a city being 10 square miles, every piece of parcel is important, but I mean, in a case like this, I think it's
we need to have a public hearing on it first, so, yeah.
Yeah.
Shall we go ahead and open it for a public hearing, or are there other clarifying matters we need to discuss with Mr. Engel first? Okay, let's do the public hearing. Is there anybody here in council chambers who would wish to speak on this matter? Is there anybody online who would wish to speak on this matter?
I see no raised hands. I see no raised hands.
All right, so the public hearing we will now close. Comments from council, motions? Actually, we just need to, the motion would be to carry it to the next meeting for a second reading if we decide we want to do that.
Yeah, I'm of two minds on this. I mean, I've spoken to Councilor Payne at least one time. I mean, I can see why keeping this little sliver where it is could be a good thing. Maybe we could have a little pocket park, something like that, or maybe with something with cat. But on the other hand, it's been there since 1979. Is that what you said? I was 7 years old then. It's been there that long, and we haven't done anything with it. And it's concerning to me that that the owner of the land behind is the ones having to keep up, apparently, the maintenance on our property, which is a problem. So I guess if there had been sort of like a plan where we're going to do this, and we felt like with all the other things that, Mr. Sanders is trying to help us get through, that this was like at the top of the list or towards the top, I think I'd be inclined to keep it. But what I don't want to be is 5 years down the road and have the same thing come up again. We've not done anything with it. I'm not that in terms of the money, this isn't a huge sum. But that's I don't know why we would hold on to this little island of land unless we have a plan to do something with it. And again, I think it's problematic that that the owner behind there is having to do our landscaping. That's what I have to say.
My perspective is the same as the last time this was discussed, which is, again, that land is our most valuable commodity. The city owning and acquiring more is extremely important, and I won't pretend like this is the most important piece of land in the city. It's clearly not. But I still think there should be a high bar for the city relinquishing land that we own for clear public benefit. And we're getting, in the context of our budget, an inconsequential amount of money, probably to facilitate them, I would guess, either expanding the parking lot or consolidating the lot for sale, fine enough. I just don't find it to be a compelling enough reason to get rid of land, because I still think I could easily envision its use for pocket park, part of a streetscape in the future, potentially a bus stop, although we don't know how they would interact with expanded routes and where they would go there. But we're just losing all those opportunities for no clear public benefit in my mind, and that's still where I'm at.
We can hold it over to vote next time?
Well, we would, in any event, we would pass it on to the next meeting.
Yes. I need to think about it a little more, but
Okay.
I can support, at this point in time, Mr. Engel's proposal.
Vice Mayor Wade, any thoughts?
No, I mean, I'm prepared to vote in support of it, but
So shall we pass it on to the next meeting, and we can not put it on the consent agenda, and if people have more thoughts, we can talk about it then?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Sound like a
That's
plan?
good. I'd like to
Okay.
do that.
All right, so let's pass it, and we'll figure it out in more detail September 5. Thank you, Mr. Engel. Okay, next up is a resolution to approve the compensation policy and pay structure for Charlottesville employees. Ms. Hardy, Mr. Sanders?
Yes, sir, Mayor Snook. As Ms. Hardy approaches, just want to remind council and the public that work that's been going on thus far in regards to the comp and class implementation, the study and subsequent implementation, just is really a part of our modernizing our city compensation process. For too long, our employees have been in what I would consider to be a free fall environment, where the best battle is how they get an extra pay increase, and that is not the appropriate way to do this work. And it's not always based on merit. So our team has been doing this work, trying to get us ready to bring forward a compensation policy and a pay structure. So Ms. Hardy's going to walk you through that, and then I will wrap it up and give you something to think about.
Fire away.
All right. Good evening, Mayor, councilors, and City Manager Sanders. I'm really pleased for this opportunity to present to you our general unaffiliated non-union employees' proposed final draft pay structure and compensation policy this evening. So also included in your agenda packet for tonight's presentation was a copy of the proposed final draft of the pay structure with all positions listed by salary range and band, a copy of the 19 pay steps within each of the salary ranges and bands, a copy of the final updated compensation draft policy for our general unaffiliated employees, and FAQs about the policy and process that was provided publicly. So as part of this presentation, I will also provide a little background information into the process of updating our pay plan and policy and the next steps. And for the sake of transparency and clarity, we're going to start in on the first slide. I'm getting ahead. Okay, so obviously very, very important. We want to make sure with any of our processes and policies that it's easily understandable. And so for the sake of transparency and clarity, as well as in the policies, I provided some information on compensation terms. So when we talk about a classification of position, it's also the process that involves reviewing the duties and responsibilities assigned to a position. Every position has what's called a classification. And then we have what's called a pay grade or pay band. That's the individual assignment to the pay or salary range of the salary within by corresponding number. And all regular positions have an assigned pay range based on the city's pay plan. We have our pay or salary range spread, which is the percentage of difference between the pay minimum and maximum of the pay range. So this will vary, of course, depending upon the level of position in the organization. And this represents the maximum pay earning potential for a classification within the assigned pay range. Next, we have a couple of really important concepts here. Pay or salary compression. So this is a condition which occur in which jobs requiring significantly different levels of responsibility or professional expertise have a different pay differential that is too small to be considered equitable. So this is really, really important, and it happens in two cases. It happens when we have a new employee that's hired and the pay offer may be the same as a tenured employee. It can also happen when there isn't enough of a pay difference between jobs in a series, such as a supervisor from a subordinate. So there's not enough of a pay differential. Okay, so this is important for us to look at with this process. We also have to look at pay equity, which is our practice of compensating employees in a consistent and fair way for the same or essentially similar work, regardless of race, gender, disability, sex, sexual orientation, and or other status. And then there's also this internal equity piece, which is about the pay relationships among positions in the organization that may not be able to be benchmarked to the outside market, or that may have a different internal value than described from what we have seen maybe like in the Gallagher study. So with the pay structure update process, so sorry about that. So we placed all of the non-union employee classification titles within the new pay structure. And so with that process, we looked at reviewing Gallagher's benchmark survey information. So for each position, the benchmark title and their market midpoint from the 50th percentile from the Gallagher study. We looked at pay equity, which included looking at city positions that were of similar skill, effort, responsibility, and working conditions to ensure that their placement within the appropriate proposed salary structure grade was similar. We also looked at what we call internal equity, and this is that term that we talked about in the previous slide, the placement of positions in the pay structure based on their skill, effort, responsibility, and working conditions for which there was no available data from the Gallagher benchmark summary. We also looked at pay compression, again, to make sure that the pay differentials, that there was enough of a spread whenever possible between supervisors and subordinates and new hires and tenured employees. We also met with our city manager and deputy city managers and department leadership about the salary structure, the compensation policy draft, anticipated next steps. We provided information for leadership to share with employees about the process and next steps. We posted publicly to our website with notification to employees and through department bulletin boards on July 20th, 2023, and the employee public hearing that was held for that process on July 27th, 2023, which provided an opportunity for employees to provide feedback into the process or the public. We also provided an opportunity for feedback from employees and have provided responses through the HR class and comp at charlottesville.gov email address. And finally, we received final approval from the city manager to bring forward to council the updated final proposed pay structure and compensation policy before you today. So the new salary structure includes approximately 25 pay grades. There's a 7% differential between each of the individual pay grades themselves, so it's consistent. There are consistent salary range spreads for each of the pay ranges, 45, 50, and 55% spreads in each pay grade. All part-time and full-time benefited position classifications were placed in the pay grades or structure. And there also is, as I referred to, the supplemental pay step plan made up of 19 steps with approximately 2.2% between each step for pay progression and individual employee placement. And just a note, as you may have seen in the master draft listing of all the positions and their salary ranges, we have this, what's called UC. It's an unclassified designation for those positions, including, for example, the elected constitutional officers and other positions which do not have a pay range set in the new structure. We also worked on updating our compensation policy, which we'll get to in a second, and I so apologize that this format didn't turn out very well, but as you can see, there's approximately 25 bands, and those are all the particular salary ranges and spreads for the proposed structure. And a more clear copy that is legible is in your packet. Okay. So this compensation policy, which we're going to briefly talk about next, will replace sections 5.1 through 5.5 in the city personnel policies. There's basically a holding spot that said we are holding this until we get through this update, and a copy of that is in the agenda packet. And so we updated, of course, the policy to be in compliance with best practices and also to be in alignment with what our market policy is and for ease of plan administration. So just to talk a little bit about the policy highlights, we talked about this. This is our plan. This is the city's plan. And we want to make sure that everybody can understand it and it's as easy to administer as possible, right? We want to take out any sort of concept of that it's not transparent or not easy to understand. So we have made clear definition of terms for ease of understanding. We want to take out that mystery of the process. There's a solid definition of market-based pay plans and the importance of having an internally equitable and externally competitive plan, being fiscally responsible, wanting to attract diverse, inclusive, equitable, talented, and retain our employees. That's really important. We talk about the whole job ranking process, which is our method of looking at all the components that go into what's called the worth of a job. So that's our minimum education certifications, the technical knowledge of the position, supervisory skills, interpersonal skills, problem-solving skills, responsibilities, and working conditions. We talk about pay placement in the policy, which is how positions are placed in the pay structure, and that is, I've touched on this about the skill, effort, responsibility, working conditions, complexity of duties, recruitment and retention needs, and the value of the city's position and goals as the position relates to it. And then there are sometimes other documented factors. Talks about how pay adjustments occur and how salary range progression occurs as well, including with performance evaluations. And then there's a section called Other Special Pay Changes that provides authority for the city manager to recognize and provide additional pay that does not fall under the other categories, such as we currently have this language in our policies called temporary additional duties pay. For example, this would be, say, if a director or manager was covering for 3 different positions. That's not really clarified in current policy. So it provides some provision for those kinds of things. And that is my presentation. Are there any questions, councilors?
Thank you. Else, questions? Yes, ma'am.
You discussed that there were some people that did not fall within your study. How are salaries handled for those employees? I think you said constitutional employees and several other categories. Could you explain that, please?
Yes, so there that classification of what's called UC, and I think one of the attachments in the handout talks about the fact that some positions are appointed by council, some positions are confirmed by council, and when we looked at the other cities and counties and what they were doing, they also classified these positions as well as unclassified because they technically frankly, it was hard to do apples to apples, or there weren't enough comparators in some cases. Some of the positions were unique. So that's what that UC refers to. You're welcome.
Hey, thank you for the presentation. I guess one question I have is, as I read it, on a person's annual performance review, if they do satisfactory, is there sort of a automatic increase in their pay? Am I misunderstanding that, or is that basically correct?
No, Counselor. The intent would be that if these would be done on an annual basis, tied in with the budget process, of course, subject to as long as our city manager is okay with us. But the idea is all performance or evaluations are done through the year. If you meet the standard for performance, you're eligible for your step increase, subject, of course, to budget appropriation as approved by council. Got it. Okay. Yeah, I just want to say that I'm really impressed that this has been done, and people have other questions, I'm sure, but when I came on board council, there was just a lot of things like this, having an employee handbook, having clear standards of behavior, and having a class and comp study, and I see these are the kinds of things that are really going to build the city for the future and make us a place where people want to work. And so I'm just grateful for you and your staff and for all of you for sticking with it. Thank you.
And speaking of future, how do you feel like this has some staying power, that we won't be doing this again in a few years? What if we find that, accountants or something has become more competitive? Do you have some flexibility in there to make adjustments without, not that we don't want to hear it, but you have some authority to, make some adjustments and things like that?
That's a great question. So the idea is that we are going to keep this plan maintained. Certainly, the labor market changes, and our conditions here may change too, right? There may be some different internal equity placed on positions that we may not have necessarily had before, depending upon internal factors. So definitely we want to have that flexibility. There is some language in the code that talks about when such changes would be triggered to come before council, but it certainly gives the city manager a lot of flexibility to be able to grow with this particular structure, and we hope that it will be easier to maintain, because the idea is to apply the COLA, right? So you get a step increase, and then you have a small COLA as approved by council that's applied every year. So the structure continues to be maintained. It doesn't fall behind the market.
So we're set up so that we won't, that is going to be dynamic. It's going to be in, that frequently, or periodically I should say, there's going to be updates and, to keep up with the market and things like that.
Now, it will be at the city manager's purview to determine when we're going to go out for our next salary study. And I hope it's not for a while, but because it's quite an undertaking. But having said that, the idea is it's really critical. It's been a while since we've done this, and we want to make sure that to the extent that we can, we certainly keep it maintained. We understand how important it is for employees.
Thank you.
Just two questions. The first one is, implementing this, is there an expectation for upcoming budget cycle, like an additional investment that's going to be necessary, and what that number is?
Yes, I will defer to the city manager on that one.
I'll take that one. In looking at next steps, and this is where I make Chrissy cringe. If she were in here, she'd be eyeballing me right now. But this is going to be very expensive, and that is part of the gut check that we've had to have at the table in looking at how far behind we have fallen, and trying to do right by the employees, and ensuring that they feel valued and respected and are getting this right. I can tell you that right now, if I had to put a dollar price tag on this, and Chris is going to hate me for doing this, but if I had to put a dollar amount on what it takes tomorrow, flip the switch, total impact, at least $10 million. That's an increase to our bottom line to that tune. That's getting it right. I don't see that being the recommendation that I would bring forward, of course, in that we have to really do a number of things. I think we still have some things to learn in this process. We don't have job descriptions for every position. We're putting out an RFQ maybe tomorrow to hopefully get some help to help us do that. There are a number of things that still have to be worked out. But the disciplined approach, that's my favorite word, is to roll this forward step by step. So we'll take some incremental steps. The first step that I have embraced wanting to prioritize is moving any employee who today falls below the minimum that has been set for that position, to move them, and to move them as soon as we possibly can. That is going to be a determination that I will have to make and then bring back a recommendation for you. There's an opportunity that we might be able to bridge that, making it sooner rather than later, or we make it a part of the budget ask for next year and it goes into effect July 1. In the meantime, we'll be able to take on some additional considerations and determine what we can afford, what else is on that list, and try to bring forward 2 or 3 other items that we feel like you can manage being able to absorb in one budget cycle. But this is a multi-year process. I've been very clear and frank with the staff that my goal is to communicate as much as I possibly can, as often as I possibly can, just letting them know that we're trying to get it right and there's some measured steps that we have to take to ensure that that is done. But the first step would be to be able to afford, and it's roughly $250,000 just to do that, to move anyone to the minimum that is not currently there today.
Yeah, that's all very, very helpful, and definitely agree we've got to be realistic about implementation, but agree with other counselors that I also don't view this implementation as a choice. It has to happen. The only other question, if this is not germane to this, just let me know. But we've started to get a few email questions coming in about changes in part-time classifications and hours worked, and I know this made reference to part-time employees. Is that change related to this in any way, or is that a separate change that has happened?
No, that's a great question, but that isn't part of this process.
Thank you.
Mhm.
That's questions.
So, we need a motion. Somebody like to move?
Happy to do that. Yes, I would like to move the resolution in the packet adopting an updated compensation plan pay scale for employees of the city of Charlottesville.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? I would just like to very briefly echo some of the other comments that I know from from my discussions with staff members as individuals over the last few years. There's been a lot of frustration with the pay structure, or frankly, a lack of pay structure. You end up with a paycheck and there's no clear idea of when you might ever expect to get a raise, either as a merit raise or as a cost of living or anything else. And if nothing else, being able for people to be able to see where they fit into this structure and to have some sense of, hey, there are steps, there are pay grades, there are ways forward, there are ways to make some more money, I'm hoping will help with morale issues.
Yeah, and to add to that, I think, for the residents that are watching this or read about it tomorrow, it's not only because in my view, this is the right thing to do for the people that work for the city, but I really think you get what you pay for. I mean, I don't mean to put it in such reductionist terms, but if we want to have these sort of organizational excellence that we talk about, and we want our city to be, on the edge, moving things forward in the ways that we talk about, we need to be able to recruit and retain the best. And I think that this is an important part of that, and that our citizens, who are very much, wanting the best out of us, hopefully they'll see the connection here. So.
Yep.
Mr. Mayor, I appreciate our city manager's statement to explain to the employees and all that I know he is doing with the organization that this is a process. This is something that is needed. All of the employees in this organization are valued. And we will do this, and we will take our time, and we will get it right. And he has already identified the first group in the rollout. So we're going to all be patient because we know it's coming, and we know that he is going to do it not necessarily with all deliberate speed, but he's going to do it carefully, and it will be done right so that we do not have to come back in 5 or 10 years to undo something that we didn't do right in 2023.
Any other discussion? Are we ready to vote? Okay, please vote.
Thank you so much.
Passes 5-0.
Thank you very much.
And Mayor, if I could just take a moment and just thank Chris Baudo and Jamie Valencia for supporting Mary Ann in this work. They've been doing a yeoman's job of just getting this done while also trying to deal with everything else that HR has to do on a daily basis.
Thank you. Yeah, I just think that the amount of change that the HR office has been able to bring in the last year and a half has been very impressive.
Yep.
Thank
More
you.
to come.
Okay, next item on the agenda, resolution supporting the Sister Cities Commission's request to host a delegation from the Charlottesville Friendship City, Huehuetenango, Guatemala, for an exploratory visit. Mr. Herring.
Yes. Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Good evening.
Good evening.
So, I'm assuming I just push this button?
Or you just talk?
Well,
It's gonna
you have
load
a,
in a second.
Yes.
He has a thing.
I have a presentation.
You have a
Loading in just
presentation.
a minute.
I'm sorry?
It'll
He
pop
has a
up.
thing.
It'll
His
pop up.
presentation.
It'll pop up if I'm patient, right?
Yes, sir.
And away we go.
There we go.
There we go.
Ta-da.
Well, once again, good evening, everyone, and thank you for taking the time. I was here about a month ago, and we talked about our update for the whole year. And back in February, I was able to go to Huehuetenango, and what I thought I would do was go back and give you a little bit of a history as to how we got there, what we accomplished, and why we think there's a next step. And once again, as the resolution states, that we recommend moving forward with our exploratory phase of the relationship with Huehuetenango. Now, the organization is called Sister Cities International or Sister Cities Commission. But when we start off with a possible new city, we start in a mandatory 3-year exploratory phase in which we get to know each other. It's sort of like dating or an engagement to see if we really want to get married or not. That might not be the best example, but I think it's the only one I can come up with right now. And so if we are able to approve this, then I would go back and prepare official letters in English and in Spanish for us to send to the members of the commission in Huehuetenango. And now, once again, to go back to the exploratory process, we officially began our relationship with Huehuetenango in July of 2021. We started in 2019, but as you know, with the pandemic, a lot of things were delayed. Some of the processes we would have liked to have gone through were almost impossible. And so our 3-year countdown period began on July the 1st. Now, once again, 3-year period does not mean that at the end of 3 years you have to move to be a sister city. It only means that that's the minimum amount of time we can consider. Many cities decide to stay in what we call the friendship stage, the nature of our relationship. But this time gives us time to explore what can we do together. What are the benefits for Huehuetenango, and what will be the benefits for Charlottesville? Now, the background, once again, I was on the previous commission several years ago in 2018 when the city council had approved that we could search for a Spanish-speaking sister city. And at that point in time, many candidates came forth from various different countries in South America, Central America, Mexico, as well as a couple in Spain. I left the commission, but the next commission that was there chose Huehuetenango based upon a lot of input from local community people who had ties there, who had information there. But once again, to go back to COVID, normally when there is a prospect, a city that we might want to have a relationship with, the ideal thing would be before we get into any sort of agreement, one of us would have gone there. And we would have investigated the city, the social side, the economic side of the city, as well as the educational side. But once again, because of the pandemic, we could not do that. And so there were a lot of conversations, Zoom conversations. Now, the Zoom conversations were further hampered by the fact that almost no one in Huehuetenango spoke English, and almost no one on the Sister Cities Commission at the time spoke Spanish. So a lot of the conversations were facilitated by the Ixtantan Foundation, which is a local Albemarle County foundation that has operations in Central America, and specifically in the state of Huehuetenango. Now, if you notice here as a diversion, see where Guatemala falls right between the other Central American countries. Huehuetenango is sort of on the left third, upper left third. If you see the line going through there, that's the route, that's the Pan American Highway that leads all the way up from the Americas all the way through into the United States. And so that gives you an idea of where we are. Now, as I mentioned this a moment ago, there was several video-based meetings, and the previous commission did a good job of trying to stay in contact and learn as much as they could. Now, upon agreement, back in February, or before February, I went down to Huehuetenango upon the invitation from the mayor. I spent 10 days in the country, 5 days in Huehuetenango, and then more time in the surrounding ruins and Mayan civilizations and the capital city. And I was able to meet with a lot of the future commission down there. I met with the mayor, and I participated in quite a few community events. I also met several hundred citizens, and okay, there it is. This is a test, right? All right. That was just an example of my schedule. They started me off at 8 o'clock in the morning and took me around. It was quite impressive because I had a police escort. I was driven around, and each place I would go to, and they would escort me out of the car, there would be a mariachi band playing, almost like Hail to the Chief. And I would walk in, and then there would be a couple hundred people, and there would be speeches. And it was almost like, I grew up in the Carolinas where Baptist people gave a lot of speeches. Well, the people at Huehuetenango, they gave a lot of speeches, and then I had to give a speech also. So it was a very, very busy week. And I enjoyed it very, very much. This photo quickly is the City Hall in Huehuetenango. It's a very lovely place. That is the mayor of the city of Huehuetenango. In our very, very first meeting, and he had a smile on his face because he was nervous about re-election. You should know that on June 25th, the present mayor of Huehuetenango and his cabinet, they were re-elected for another 4 years, starting in 2024. So it was good for us because their councilors make up the commission. So if they had lost the election, then all my contacts would have been gone. So I'm so happy that they won. Now, once again, this was the opening of the library that had been closed due to COVID. And the lady in the middle is the representative of a local bank who financed it. The mayor and the gentleman on the far left there represents the governor or represents the president. So it was, now, let's move on quickly through here. And once again, this was just a few weeks ago after his election. They're very proud, and that's the team, and which includes most of the members of the Assistant City Commission. And so they were very, very proud of the fact that they had won re-election. And I would be too. It was very interesting. Now, that brings us back to what we're looking to do. Following up my visit in February, the next logical step would be to allow them to come here for an official visit to meet citizens here, learn about Charlottesville. Now, so someone said, well, why do we need a resolution? Why do we need to write them an invitation? Every country has very different visa requirements. And the visa requirements for people to come from Guatemala, because I think as most of you know from the news, in Guatemala is not the easiest country in the world right now. They have had election problems, election fraud, violence, but nonetheless, the visa process for the Guatemaltecas would require that they have an invitation. And that is the particular reason why we want to make sure that from the city of Charlottesville, there's invitation to the commission, to specifically the mayor and his commission to come here. They would like to come very, very much. And so upon issuing this invitation, which will be fairly specific because I'm asking them for the names specifically of the people who will come, we want to be very, very careful and be very cognizant of State Department regulations. We want to work closely with the State Department to make sure that everyone's in agreement. And therefore, I'll be working to gather names, roles, responsibilities over the next 2 or 3 days prior to us writing, if this is approved, prior to us writing the invitation. We have informed the organization, the mother organization, Sister City International, Washington, D.C., that Wayward-Tenango is our friendship city. We've informed them when it started, and so they officially recognize us, or they're in the directory as our sister city or as our future sister city. Now, moving forward, okay, I'm not pushing the button correctly. Once again, this is what we've been talking about. We want to prepare for an official visit. Now, we've got experience in doing that. Just a few weeks ago, we had a delegation from Winneba, which went very well. I was involved in 2018 quite closely and preparing for and hosting a delegation that came from Bessenstorm, and we spent a week here, and that's one where we installed the sign for Bessenstorm Way in Charlottesville. So this wouldn't be that different. Basically a chance for the leaders of Wayward-Tenango to meet with education, tourism, industrial, as well as city municipal leaders. And so now I need to mention that each city we have has a unique relationship with Charlottesville. No two are the same. With Besançon in France, it's more of a social economic pair. We're very comfortable sending students over there. We know that they're going to go to Besançon and be almost like being at home. The lifestyle, the safety, the school, the education, the whole system match nicely with us. Other sister cities may not have the same thing. For instance, in Poggio, they really don't have a high school right in Poggio. It's part of a bigger area. Winneba is a different story, but we have historical roots and relationship with Winneba, which makes that a very, very good sister city for Charlottesville. So the relationship with Wayward-Tenango would be different. It would be based upon cultural interest more so than education. When we started this whole thing, we said, well, we want to get a Spanish-speaking sister city so that we could perhaps provide a location where our students here in our schools could spend time to help improve their Spanish. The reality is, we may not be able to do that right now directly. We have certain concerns around safety, certain concerns of how we will make that happen, certain concerns around the social economic conditions, but there's still a lot of things left over. But once again, that's why we're in the exploratory process, because the exploratory process allows us to determine what we have in common, determine what we can do. I think there are a lot of things that I saw in Wayward-Tenango that would be of tremendous interest. Now, interesting enough is that during the last few months since I was there, I continually have met people who've been there. The ladies who were here during that singing song, she asked me, two of them asked me what I was going to be talking about. I said, Wayward-Tenango. And she was piping up. She's worked with a group to take students there. She's been there. She's been several times. She was all excited. So I'm finding a lot of people throughout the whole area who have contacts, who have experiences with Wayward-Tenango. And that's quite encouraging. So, next steps. We would benefit from the preparatory work in preparing for the visit, because that would allow us then to learn enough about each other to write a formal friendship memorandum of understanding. In other words, this process we're in right now, this exploratory process, and the processes we will go through in preparing for the visit will allow us to clearly define our relationship. And we're hoping that signing a memorandum of understanding around our relationship would be a highlight of a visit if we were to approve it. Now, I'm not going to go through all this, but this is just an idea of what could happen if they were to come. It is no different than what we did when the delegation from Winneba came, nor is it any different than what we did when the delegation from France came several years ago. In the middle, we also had a small delegation about 2016 17 that came from Poggio, the mayor and several other people who came here during the film festival. And we did some of the same sort of events. So the presentation does list about 12 or 13 specific things. The week won't have all of those, but it's a good selection to choose from to find events that we can do. One of the things we also want to do is to want to look for community-based groups who might want to participate, fund, offer dinner, offer some other contribution to it. I figured that we would wrap it up here and that they would then go to DC. Undoubtedly, they would fly into DC and meet with officials from their own embassy before returning to Guatemala. And I expect they would be here probably 7 days. They are traveling on their own expense. We would have some expenses. We might want to give them a hamburger or something more than that. But at the same time, they are going to pay for their own trip, and we're going to entertain them the best we can. So this is just basically some logistics of this. Number 4, and I just mentioned a moment ago, we will seek patrons and benefactors for as many events as possible. Critical steps, that starts tonight. Agreement by the mayor and the city council to extend this invitation to Huehuetenango. The members of the Charlottesville Sister City Commission, we've met, we discussed it, and we are making a request. I would like to mention that over here we have Claire Gettin-Spalding, who is also a member of the commission, and Claire is responsible for communications and engagement with the citizens of Charlottesville. And we have a lot of work to do because the delegation in Huehuetenango is hoping to come this fall. It normally takes a lot longer, but we've been doing this before. We know what we need to do, and I think that we can make it happen, and we can do an excellent job of it. And once again, as I mentioned, this event closely follows the model of the 2018 visit by the Mayor of Bestizon. More about Huehuetenango. I mentioned this briefly before. There was my transportation, as you might will see. You fly to capital city, which is the city of Guatemala City. That is the only transportation by air between Guatemala City and Huehuetenango. You could drive, but it takes about 4 or 5 hours to rent a car on mountainous roads. Or you could take a bus, which takes an additional 2 or 3 hours. But this was pretty good. It was up and down in 25 minutes. I'm a former Army pilot, so it didn't bother me. I was hoping he'd go back and forth a couple of times. It was a lot of fun. And I feel it necessary to state that the whole country of Guatemala is under travel advisory by the State Department. They did say that the city of Huehuetenango is safe. They feel comfortable with that. But they listed cities they thought would not be safe. So once again, that's perhaps one of the reasons that I'm not so sure that we will be ready to move with our normal student exchanges. But we have to get to know each other. I've listed several things that we would want to know. Travel and security conditions would not support student exchanges, but also the public schools don't have the resources. The families there, we don't have a large middle class. So we don't have a lot of families to choose from to host our students, and the schools are different. But once again, we have other possibilities. I've spent the last several months talking with different teachers. Now I'm also, last year, I taught languages at Charlottesville High School, so I work very, very close with the World Language Department. There are opportunities on the level of teacher exchanges, on teachers working together, on doing Zoom lessons, on interchanging pen pals. There are so many avenues for our students to work with each other. Opportunities for a Spanish teacher from Huehuetenango to come here and teach Spanish while one of our English teachers would go there. We have lots of opportunities. And so the task right at hand is to define and explore those other opportunities. Okay. And trade and commerce opportunities are limited. It's a big coffee producer, but that's big business. That's really, really big business. Over 60% of the people in Guatemala particularly work in small home industries or shops or family shops. So we don't have an abundance of large corporations to hire people. Therefore, the whole economic structure is very, very different here. They don't really have anything they can do. They do all the handwork or textile goods. But we see that if we walk down the mall any day, we'll see a tremendous number of little shops with textile goods from somewhere along South and Central America. So, but Guatemala is ripe for the right kind of tourism. I could envision working with tour companies and working through the other foundations, small groups of people getting together under the right conditions with security, with transportation, going to Guatemala in a similar way that we go to Winneba. I think that could happen very, very easily. So, that being said now, I took the photo there from the top of a taller ruin, which is like, okay, you ever do anything and you get there and you go like, why did I do that? And I'm going like, I walked up there and I'm going like, as I stood there gasping for breath, because first of all, they're high in the mountains, and I'm not exactly Tiny Tim, and so I'm going running up the top with my camera in my hand and taking the pictures, and then I had to sit down for a couple of moments before I could go climb back down, but it was beautiful. That's close to the city of Huehuetenango. I have a gift for the city council, which I will get when I'm walking through your myth, which is a framed picture of this particular ruin. And this was out. We had gone to dinner. This is part of the Sister City Commission with a guide. We were even, with the Sister City Commission, they had a guide, an English-speaking guide, he spoke several languages, who was able to take us around and show us the type of things that tourists from this area would be able to do and see. Once again, City Hall, and I thank you very, very much on behalf of the Charlottesville Sister City Commission, and I hope that you will consider favorably on the resolution to invite the mayor and the commission from Charlottesville, from Huehuetenango, to visit us here in Charlottesville. Do we have any questions?
Questions for Mr. Herring?
No. Clearly a lot of thought, care, and work has gone into that, and I would move to approve a resolution approving exploratory visit by Huehuetenango Sister Cities delegation.
Is there a second? You got a second? Any discussion? Please cast your vote then.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Mr. Herring.
Thank you.
And good night.
Good night.
Take care.
Next is a resolution for land acquisition of property on Moores Creek for park and trail use. Mr. Gensick?
I am going to start. For the record, I'm Brenda Kelly, Redevelopment Manager. And before I hand it over to Mr. Gensick to talk about the specific request, I wanted to just bring up a little bit about process. As you may recall, we were in front of you quite a while ago talking about an inventory of city-owned properties. And at that time, we talked to you about the need to develop specific procedures to address property acquisition and management of the inventory and property disposition. So this is one of the first items in front of you. This will be a work in progress to develop a procedure for looking at and evaluating requests for property acquisition. But we just wanted to bring this in front of you right now as we work through developing the standard procedure. And you'll see in your packages, there's a city checklist package attached. We hope to keep this a standard procedure so you'll know what information we're looking to provide you and in what format as we continue to develop this. Our target is to eventually have a written standard operating procedures that the city manager will sign off on, and that's what all departments will need to review and process these types of requests in front of you going forward. So just wanted to let you know that as we move forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, councilors, Mr. Sanders, Ms. Thomas. Chris Gensick, I'm the Parks and Trails Planner for the City of Charlottesville. As such, we have been talking with this landowner on the south side of the creek at Azalea Park for 10 years or so. The family is ready to move forward with letting the city acquire this as public parkland. We managed to acquire 2 grants through the state and the feds to pay for the cost of this property. The city paid for some survey work and title. I'm going to flip through a few quick slides. I think you have seen this before to appropriate the grants. So like Ms. Kelly mentioned, we are here tonight to get final resolution to give the attorney's office the permission to go forward with the closing process with the lawyers. This is an outline of the parcel. It's roughly 8.5 acres. The IRC farm is currently occupying the space. So we are having a staff discussion right now about a lease proposal that would come to you shortly after this to make sure they can remain on the property while we go through public processes about planning for this new piece of parkland. As we do with any new piece of parkland, we give the public the opportunity to comment, give input on what they might want to use the land for. We do want to move the trail to the south side of the creek rather than cross the creek twice in the same property. It's a lot cheaper, ended up being cheaper to buy the property than to build a bridge to cross over. So we may still build a bridge later, but this means we don't need a bridge right away. We've got plenty of other bridges to build. So this basically is coming to us essentially for free with the grants. There are a few photos here. This is the entrance you've probably seen from Old Lynchburg Road when you come through. I don't know how many of you have actually toured the farm. It's really beautiful, the different gardens and the things people grow in there, and how successful that project has been, and how this will support our urban agricultural and food equity goals across the city. This will be an excellent case in point to move that kind of model forward. We have some invasive plants here on this property. I've already met with our urban forester and landscape manager about some plans to think about in the future once this becomes city property to deal with the trees that are covered in vines and some other things. And the Ravenna Trails Foundation has walked it and looked at the possibility of moving the trails, and they're very supportive of that movement at the time. So I believe this is one of the last pieces. The trail would basically use the driveway that comes through the garden, so we don't really have to build much to make this an accessible piece of property to the public. We can open the doors pretty quickly after acquisition. So tonight's action item would be a resolution to allow staff to continue to close on this property and acquire it as part of our public parkland.
Councilors, questions?
I was able to take a tour at one point, and I understand, Mr. Jensick, you've been helping cobble together pieces of land around the perimeter of the city for a long time to have an urban ring where people can ride their bikes and so forth. And I thank you for your advocacy on this.
Thank you. It takes a lot of patience, but as the pieces come together, it's a permanent thing. It's neat to see.
Yeah, it is.
I'm just curious, I assume that the same money could have been available to the county. Why was this purchase of county land made by the city?
Their structure for parkland and trails acquisitions has been different in the past. They waited for land to develop, and they used proffer systems to acquire these trail pieces. Back in my beginnings, basically council authorized us to work at the city borders if need be to pick up pieces that allow the trail system to work right across the border from the city. I think the county's moving towards having an actual budget, but I was blessed early with a budget to kind of go shopping and the ability to write these sorts of grants and actively seek putting these pieces together, where the county was a little more passive. This was 10, 15 years ago. I think they've become more active in this situation. We're discussing how the trails would be maintained in parks in the long run, where maybe there's pieces that are closer to their shop and their lawnmowers, and they could take those on, and there's pieces that are closer to our shop, and rather than us crisscrossing each round in the urban ring. That discussion hasn't come to any conclusions yet, but we are aware that there's blurring of the lines at the city limits and where these creeks are in trail systems.
I mean, it doesn't offend me, it just causes me to wonder.
We're just more active at it, I believe, would be one way to frame it.
Other questions, comments?
Yeah, well, I think that strategy of land acquisition is fantastic, and I think this is a particularly good example of how it can make a really huge long-term impact for the future of the city. So, just exciting to see. I'd be prepared to move for approval of a resolution approving the acquisition of land at 410 Old Lynchburg Road.
Second.
Any discussion, councilors? If not, let's vote.
Thank you all very much.
Thank
Have a
you.
good evening.
Next up, resolution to approve home ARP funds, Anthony Warren and Alex Ikafuna.
Good evening, councilors, Mayor Snook, Vice Mayor Wade, Ms. Thomas, members of the public. We are here tonight to discuss implementation plan for the Home ARP funding that has been received by the City of Charlottesville from the Federal Department of Urban Housing and Urban Development in the approximate amount of $347,404. As you may be aware, this is a one-time allocation from HUD to support the development of rental housing. It was discussed in front of the Planning Commission at the previous meeting this month and passed on for further consideration by council. We had a very open and competitive grants application process, much like we do for our mainstream CDBG and home projects. We had a NOFA released. I provided pre-application workshops and training to people who were very interested. I will note that the number of people who expressed interest in that, who were seeking direct rental support, was much greater than the actual people interested in using the money. That was a very informative data point for me to see how much need is out there. We received applications. We convened the CDBG and Home Task Force, consisting of representatives from throughout the city, who considered each of the 4 received applications and had very thoughtful and engaging conversations about how to maximize impact in an area of high need for our community, and formulated 2 funding resolutions that are before you tonight for consideration. One being for a group called Community Supportive Housing, and their program is called Continued Rehabilitation Repairs to Preserve CSH Affordable Housing, Rental Housing. It's a number of units that they currently operate that are in need of some important repairs. The funding recommendation was for $67,361, and the benefit would help maintain this property. It would also entail, I believe this is intended to be permanent affordable rental housing, but any use of this money does entail a mandated 15-year affordability period. So that's a benefit for clarifying that. And the larger amount that the task force put forth was to support the Piedmont Housing Alliance and their redevelopment of the 1025 Park Street redevelopment, a much larger project. And there were other applications, but they were, one was not considered to be as shovel-ready, and we want to make sure, HUD has waived a lot of their rules to try to make sure that this money gets out the door and into meaningful projects as soon as possible. And so council is being asked to consider and act on these resolutions. This is the first of 2 readings, and I will be available to take any questions unless Alex has anything else to add.
Thank you for that. I guess one question I have is in the packet, I see 2 separate, I see a appropriation of Home America Rescue Plan Home ARP funds that has the 2 different organizations the money is going to, and then there's another one just after resolution approving the action plan.
Right.
Are you looking at number 14 on the agenda, not number 13?
Yeah, separate.
There are 2
Yeah,
for
the
number
number.
13 also.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay,
So for this
sorry.
one, there's an
Well,
approval
I don't-
resolution and an appropriations resolution.
I don't think so. So under 13,
It's 2 items within that same.
2 items within 13. Okay. What's the difference?
I see a resolution at page 182 of the packet. Oh, and there's, the one before that, yeah, 180, I got you, okay.
May I say that?
Yeah, there are 2 resolutions. Dealing with $347,404.
That's on page 180.
That's it, and then come down to 182.
Okay, hold on.
And that's the resolution approving. The first is the appropriation,
And then the second is the resolution approving.
yeah.
Okay, that's on 182.
Okay.
Okay.
I see.
All right, thank you,
I don't see
Mr.
any
Mayor.
reason we can't move approval of
And
both of them at the
Brian.
same time.
I agree. To the consent agenda?
Looks good to me.
Yeah.
Consent
Yeah.
agenda, folks?
Yes.
I'm good with
I'll-
that.
I'll separate those out for the next
Okay.
agenda.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas. Okay, now the second item that you've got, this is one reading.
Yes.
CDBG and home.
Yes, so the next item refers to the annual process that we go through to report out our accomplishments for the use of CDBG and home funds. As part of that process, we make recommendations to council about the priorities for the upcoming federal fiscal year awards, and those build on the current approved priorities. We've clarified some of the language, in part to, in one example, to place a greater emphasis in the public amenities and infrastructure section on reducing barriers of access for our fellow residents who are mobility impaired. Recently, we did some work in Washington Park, and as we address with various other city offices and departments how to roll out our plans in the future, we'd just like to make the reduction of barriers to mobility impaired citizens slightly higher emphasis in our work.
So on that note, on page 184, you've got the chart, Table 1 CDBG activities for the last fiscal year, number of businesses assisted, goal, actual, persons assisted, goal, actual, and so on. And I guess, I think I asked you this when we were talking before, but it seems to me that the number for enhance and improve access to neighborhood amenities, explain that a little bit. What exactly does that measure, and what activities were involved?
That's a very good question. This is my first time rolling through the process of the CAPER, and one of the things that struck me was that the report touches on every possible area of implementation for CDBG and home funds, even if they're not part of your annual plan. So during the last process of developing a 5-year comprehensive plan, the city was asked to outline a number of goals over the 5-year period. And then in each of the 1-year action plans, they outlined their activities that they would undertake. In that year, our largest item was to support Parks and Recreation in the construction of a trail bridge to connect certain neighborhoods in the area to Jordan Park. For a variety of reasons, that project is still underway. So while that is estimated in the plan to have a pretty big impact, because it is still in the process of being rolled out, that data, we're not allowed to report that data until the bridge project is actually completed. Other projects include, well, the Washington Park data won't be reported until next year, but the way HUD calculates some of the data, we have jobs training programs that allow people wider access to the employment market. So the data, the way it's reported, seems kind of confusing, because when you first look at it, you'll see a lot of zeros. But until you go back to the actual action plan, you'll see that maybe that part of the process was not emphasized that year.
Okay. Questions, anybody else?
I hate to ask such a basic question, but I don't actually see the CAPER in the packet. Is there a link to it, or am I missing?
When the packet was being developed, the final draft for public comment was in its final form. It is hosted on the website of the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission under a very separate section. As part of our cooperation agreement, they handle the actual upload of the data into the federal grants management system called IDIS. There's a link in there.
It's on page 185 at the bottom. If I'm reading it
The
correctly.
link is GJPDC link.
It says the Thomas Jefferson Regional Home Consortium
Yes.
Caper 2022. Is that it?
Yes, Counselor.
Okay, so it's at the bottom of
We put the link
page
there even though the
185.
document was not ready yet. I'm sorry.
Okay, yeah, so, yeah.
So
But
use
it's up
the
there.
draft document when we go there.
So it looks like you've summarized in your document the
Components of it.
Yeah, we tried, yes.
Okay, now I see what you're talking about when you say there are a lot of zeros.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. They were just not elements that were actually involved in the plan. That year, the award was approximately 430,000 something. I was not here at the time. And 41.37% of that went to this trail bridge project that's still in the process of being rolled out.
And so what happens with this CAPER report? So it sounds like there's an online federal system this is uploaded to, and
Yes.
they look at it, and you do this every year, is that right?
Yes, it's part of the regular ongoing HUD process in that they award money and then we develop a plan to implement the money. You guys approve that plan, hopefully. And then we engage in the activities, we award to subrecipients. And then at the end of the year, at the final part of that process, is to engage in this CAPER, the Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report process. And then at the final, we'll be back again in September 5, and then if approved, then HUD evaluates that report, and they'll have feedback or whatever. And mainly for HUD, it's their way of making sure that we're aware of our priorities and the steps we're taking to meet them. So this will be the final CAPER report under the previous 5-year plan, and then in some of my first involvement before council, we were developing the current 5-year plan leading through fiscal year 2017.
Good evening, councilors, the city manager, and the public. I just want to clarify something in terms of Councilor Pinkston's questions. There is what the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development uses, which is IDIS, Integrated Disbursement Information System. It's essentially financial management system which is used by all the grantees or entitlement communities throughout the United States. So they want to make sure that there is a standardized system for entering data in terms of performance. So after this discussion with council tonight, we are going to enter the data into the system and then uploads that. Then once HUD accepts it, then they close the system. We will no longer have access to it until they complete their evaluation. And essentially what they will be evaluating is they want to make sure by cross-referencing the money we spent, the sub-recipients we granted the money, and the information we reported. So they make sure that everything jives together. And if it does, they usually send a letter to the city indicating that the city's annual performance evaluation report is satisfactory.
Thank you.
I just have one question for the council priorities for the infrastructure investments and improved access to public amenities. Would those investments need to happen in priority neighborhoods?
That's up to council to decide. My understanding, certain projects are can be assigned to a particular neighborhood like a priority, or some of them can be assigned to a citywide benefit. So when we came before you for the ADA enhancements at Washington Park, while that resided in the neighborhood, after consulting with HUD office in Richmond, it was identified as a citywide benefit. So even though, I don't know what the visitation numbers are for the park, it hosts a lot of festivals, it has a benefit to 48,765 people because that was the last number that HUD had for city population, even though it's a little higher. So therein kind of lies the rub with the way the data is reported. City population's higher, they use the metropolitan statistical area data that lags by a couple of years, and then we have to assign a benefit. So just to directly answer your question, it could go to certain neighborhoods, it could go to a citywide benefit, it could go to support one of the specific small area plans. I believe council has a lot of leeway in terms of how they direct that money.
Sure. Yeah, and that's a very good example that helped me understand that tension a lot better. But yeah, no, I'm comfortable with the priorities. I know we talked about this before. I'll just say again, I just really think any infrastructure should be focused only on neighborhoods and communities that historically were disinvested from the city. And I know there's exceptions, but I would just say usually I feel like I'd be more comfortable if that infrastructure money is coming from our CIP as opposed to this. But I understand the flexibility and I'm fine with it being included as a priority.
We agree.
Okay, so we have two different resolutions here. Are folks ready to move forward?
I'd
First-
like another 3
Oh.
seconds here, please.
Okay.
Maybe. Hold on. So you all had, this CAPER is for the city, not for the surrounding counties? Or does it include
The actual
Correct.
document that'll be filed by TJPDC is regional.
regional?
Yeah.
Okay.
The CDBG portion will be just city-related because we're the recipients of the CDBG monies, but it will also report data for the, 5-member counties and the city for the home projects. So that's a really excellent point because sometimes I've talked to people who have seen data reported in there on the housing, affordable housing side and wondered how we got those numbers out of Charlottesville, but really it represents the 5 other members as well, 5 other county members.
So there's
Okay.
two things. We're approving the CAPER and then also establishing new priorities.
Yes.
Yes.
And I think we would
Yeah, the
talk
CAPER is
about CAPER
22,
first.
yeah, the CAPER is 22, 23, and the priorities are 24, 25.
Correct.
Right, okay.
Right, so let's take up the CAPER report for 22-23 first. Is there a motion on that?
I'll move a resolution to approve the City of Charlottesville Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report for the program year 2022 to 2023 CDBG and home program.
Second.
Is there discussion? Okay, please cast your vote. 5-0. Thank you. Next resolution on priorities.
I'll be happy to do that.
Fire away.
I move the resolution approving establishing council priorities for the program year 2024-2025 CDBG and home programs as presented here today before council.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? If not, please vote. That also passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Next item agenda, resolution to approve the Sixth Amendment amended grant agreement for CSRAP.
They make it all hard,
Alex, are you with
not complicated.
presenting this?
Good evening again, Mr. Mayor, councilors. This is an annual allocation to CRHA in the amount of $900,000 for rental assistance to the needy household in the city of Charlottesville. This is the 6th amendment. And the city has so far appropriated approximately $5.295 million since the inception of this program. And more than 30 households have been served since the program was initiated in 2028. For the program year 2022-23, 66 households were served, and of this number keeps increasing in terms of folks looking for housing in the county. The number in the county, it's 31 households, and which is about 47% of those receiving the benefit, and in the city 35. So pretty soon, perhaps next year or next couple of years, it's possible that the people that are receiving the benefits in the county may outpace the number of people receiving it from the city. Essentially, the cost of renting in the county seems to be much lower than the cost of renting in the city. So people are beginning to, if they couldn't find a rental property in the city, so the best option they have is to seek rental option in the county. 88% of the household receiving the benefits are at 30% AMI, which is good. And in the past year or two, the unspent funds were used to acquire and retain permanent affordable housing within the city of Charlottesville. Disbursement of the fund is usually every quarter, 4 times a year, and administratively, the city last year opted the administrative compensation for CRHA from 7.5% to 10%. So it's currently 10% of the amount allocated goes to CRHA for administrative related expenses. John Sales, the executive director of CRHA, it's somewhere with us through the Zoom, and he's available to answer other questions, and then I will support him in terms of answering the questions. But he has a pretty good handle in terms of how the program is being run and some of the challenges that CRHA has experienced in terms of implementation of the program. John, are you up there?
Yes, I'm here, Alex.
Okay. Okay. So if council has any question now, we'll be glad to answer the question.
So this is essentially the next step of what we've been doing, right? In other words, this is, and this was in the budget, and this is basically
Exactly.
just
Last
formalizing what we've already agreed to do.
Exactly.
Okay. No questions.
Okay. If no questions, is there a motion?
I would move the approval of the 6th amended grant agreement for the Charlottesville Supplemental Rental Assistance Program.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? If not, let's vote.
Okay, here we go.
There we go, 5-0. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, next item is a report on the internal working group on gun violence. Chief Kachis.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Mayor, Councilor, City Manager. I think I have a PowerPoint that should be coming up here soon.
PowerPoint.
Okay. So in May of 2023, interim city manager Michael Rogers charged myself and Misty Grays with chairing an internal working group comprised of department directors with the idea of developing areas of priority to address gun violence within the city of Charlottesville. This internal work group was to focus on city government capacity to address issues affecting and increasing gun violence. Now, this is different than the UVA group that's been meeting that we're also involved in. That group has community stakeholders from the region, but this was specific to our internal capacity among department directors to see what we could do within the city government. So a little background. On May 26th, the work group held its preliminary meeting, and we agreed that the group would examine data, speak with stakeholders, and identify specific deliverables. On June 20th, we had our second meeting. The work group met again to discuss heat maps, data, information gleaned from weekly community walks, the youth council that spoke in front of you, and conversations with other community stakeholders as well. On July 19th, The work group met with members of the Charlottesville Redevelopment and Housing Authority to discuss needs and ways city government can address gun violence within the areas that are most affected. And several initiatives and ideas were discussed. It was a robust conversation, and we got a lot out of it. And so we're going to talk about some of the data first, and then we'll get into the different community outreach and input where we received information and what we heard. And real quick, Part 1 crime, and just so we understand, the FBI uniform crime reporting classifies crime two different ways. Part 1 crime, which is more serious crime, and then Part 2 crime, which is typically nuisance-related stuff or quality of life type crime, like alcohol-related offenses and stuff like that. So I'm going to show you a few charts here in a minute, but actually Part 1 crime within the city is down in many categories over the last 12 months. Those categories where we've seen a reduction include aggravated assault, arson, burglary, vehicle theft, rape, and robbery. Now, we have seen an increase in some other categories. Those categories where we've seen that increase is homicide and larceny. And now it's important to understand that shots fired don't really go into either one of those categories, meaning Part 1 or Part 2 crime, because shots fired can happen a lot of different ways. And so while they're not in one of those, I think it was important that we talk about that and to show you what the data shows, because they have a real life impact to our residents. So shots fired calls for service, since January 1st of this year, we've had 252. That's since January of this year. Typically, 45% of all shots fired calls for service have occurred on weekends between 9 p.m. and 2 a.m. This is the hotspot map of where we're seeing our shots fired calls for service. This is data from July 1st of 2022 to the end of June of 2023. And if you look at the reporting period prior to that, this was July 1 of 21 to June 30th of 2022. And I'll go back so you just kind of see. I'm not sure if we can go back, but that's okay. This is an illustration. It shows the calls for service and then confirmed incidents. So if you look at July 1 of 2021 to June 30th of 2022, we had 378 calls for service with 262 confirmed cases. And a confirmed case would be, we get called, we find shell casings, damage to a vehicle, a home, something like that, okay? And you can see we're seeing a slight increase July 1 to June 30th of 2023. This is a comparison of Part 1 crimes, and you can see most of which we are seeing a reduction in. But the shots fired are obviously up, which aren't on here. Larceny and homicide are our two drivers in this category. This is year over year, so 2018 all the way up to 22, and what we've seen from a Part 1 crime comparison. Now, our crime analysts did try to forecast based on data trends where we are trending down. I'm not a tech guy, so I'm not sure how they come up with those forecasts, but he promises me there's something behind that. So
it's going down.
Some optimism.
Yes,
some
from
optimism.
1800 to 1700, it's going down.
So
Okay.
we'll keep working.
I see. Okay.
All right, so community outreach from the group. So a few things we did. We took information from our community walk-in talks that we've been doing. We met with several community groups. And then we also set a table up at West Haven Day where folks can go ahead and write down things on paper and turn them in. And so the question is, what did we hear? So these are some of the things that people wrote from the West Haven days, and also things that we have been hearing from the community. We're hearing, we want police to stop and check on us. We need to interact more with police, to interact more with the residents. We need to spend more time in the neighborhoods. We need to be more approachable. And I think you kind of see the trend, the need. What we're hearing is that the community wants us to be in the communities and engage with them and build relationships with the folks that we're here to serve. We've heard someone wrote, we want a police substation in West Haven, a neighborhood watch, more cameras, updated emergency alert systems, and need less guns. We also heard create programs for single parents, mentors to teach life skills, need more programs to support preteens, undesignated spaces. We hear the undesignated spaces a lot, and that came from also the Youth Council. I think they mentioned it as well. And I think it's important to talk about that because we do keep hearing it. Unlike maybe when I was growing up, we want to go to a roller skating rink or bowling alley or something where you're doing something. Now, what we're hearing is they just want to go somewhere and hang out with their friends. That's safe. Increased consistency of presence by service providers, more events to bring the community together like West Haven Day, community-based mediators, regular litter pickups, and keep streets clean, support mental health needs in the community, and then more support for mental health and wellness by the schools. And that's why, you know, when this group was put together, having department heads or directors from throughout the city has been very helpful because we could all say, okay, these are things that the community wants and needs. Hey, this is something you can do. This is something we can handle. You know, so it was helpful. Now I'm going to turn over the long-term and short-term goals to Misty that we've identified and kind of go from there.
Oh. Well now.
I'm kidding.
We now know who's in control. We know who's in control.
This is in no way a fully comprehensive list of what, you know, all the recommendations can entail. As we all know and we have heard, gun violence and community safety is a multi-layer issue that our community is facing, and so there's not just one fix to it. Some of the initial ideas that our group has discussed has been doing a PSA campaign for responsible gun ownership, including a gun buyback program. We've talked about a specific city government career pathway program that we can develop, mentoring programs. You already continue to fund and support the KYIP program, but how can we build in more city internships for young people kind of coming up into local government interests? Implementation of the FLOC program, which I think you're going to hear about in a little bit. Graffiti removal. We have Neighborhood Development Services has a graffiti removal program. We heard from residents they want to see more litter cleanup and graffiti cleanup, and so we have a program existing that can take care of those things. We've looked at some possibilities with environmental design, taking assessments to areas that are most affected by gun violence. We've already started the city to host teen takeover nights. We've had 2 really successful events in a partnership with city schools, Carver Recreation, and Human Services Department for the De La Roll, the skate nights. I think we had about 100 kids, preteens and teens attend that event. Later in July, we'll have one more in August. We're exploring how can we continue to support some of those unstructured or undesignated places. Restructure police patrol zones, and the implementation of a strategic plan specifically to address gun violence. We've had several conversations with the organization Cities United. Mayor Snook and Mr. Rogers, when he was the interim city manager, signed off on a letter of support to reduce gun violence and the work to reduce that. They have sent us a proposal for what they call is a capacity building services for our program, essentially a strategic plan. I think our group members here agree that we don't want this internal work group to just be sort of a one thing that kind of falls off the shelf. We want it to be ongoing and sort of infused, and we feel like actually having an action plan or some support from an organization who's done it for larger cities, smaller cities that have history and context, rather than reinventing the wheel. Let's go to the experts to help us do it here. And then some of our longer term goals you can see on the next slide. Is there's an opportunity of being able to create a pre-arrest or pre-diversion program between the Human Services Department and the Charlottesville Police Department and the Court Services Unit. where youth, rather than going to intake, we can actually divert them from the whole intake process by having them referred to services rather than working with the juvenile justice system. So that's on the table to explore. Again, what might it look like to have a designated space that the city has at our disposal that's designated for teen spaces, thinking about scholarship programs for programs that we know where we know that we need workforce development. So how can we support folks to get those professional licenses so that they can get into employment with the city more quickly? We also talked about subsidizing program fees so that city residents have greater access to programs. So how can we cover the cost for a kid to do a camp or a program or a music lesson or all the variety of things that young people want to do? How can we help offset the cost, either by way of a scholarship or additional grant? So those are some of our initial ideas. We are going to continue to meet regularly to sort of work towards that implementation phase and figure out where we're going next. So.
Okay.
And Joey, want to come up? And we're going to roll right in real quick to a few slides on the FLOC program and then take questions if that works out. If that works? Okay.
You're in charge.
Councilors.
Good evening.
City Manager Sanders. I think I have a presentation popping up here too. So we're going to go over the flock safety program and what that could do for the Charlottesville Police Department and the city as a whole. So this is a very basic map here. Every map point that you have up there is a locality in Virginia that has the flock safety system already. We're going to talk about this in this presentation, but what flock safety is, they are stationary license plate reader cameras, much like Easy Pass cameras in toll booths, tunnels, Walmart parking lots, Lowe's parking lots, pretty much everywhere has them now. These are all the localities that are subscribers to the flock safety law enforcement program. Some of the benefits of flock safety to Charlottesville PD. They're a valuable tool in identifying amber, silver, and blue alerts. If you don't know what those are, amber alerts is the most common one. That's an endangered juvenile who's gone missing. Silver alerts are endangered elderly people who have gone missing. Blue alerts are direct threats to law enforcement. Say there's an active shooter where they're targeting law enforcement. It goes out to us as a blue alert through the NCIC system, which is the National Criminal Intelligence Center. And it's uploaded into both VCIN, which is the Virginia Criminal Information Center network, and it pops up into our officers and MDTs in their cars live time. So Flock updates those 4 times daily, so that there's no upload. In the past, we have had LPRs in the past that we had to manually upload. This does it automatically. It's web-based. It's also a valuable tool for successfully identifying suspects in shootings, robberies, and stolen vehicles, and we'll kind of talk about that in a little bit. So this is some stats from Hopewell Police Department here in Virginia. They implemented Flock cameras in February 2023. Since that time, directly solved because of Flock cameras, they've had 2 homicide arrests, 1 robbery arrest, 10 stolen vehicles recovered with 8 arrests associated with those vehicles. 1 hit and run was closed, and 1 theft of a Cadillac converter. Again, those were all directly solved using Flock cameras to track down the suspects. So what is Flock Safety? Flock Safety deploys solo license plate reader cameras in strategic areas designated by us. They provide still shot images of vehicles and their respective registrations as they pass by the camera. As I mentioned earlier, it is a web-based program with unlimited end users for us. They can also search for make, model of vehicle, as well as color and body type. As I mentioned, it downloads that what we call the hot list, which is stolen vehicles, any be on the lookout for, amber alerts, things like that. It uploads it automatically 4 times daily. And if one of the suspect vehicles or vehicle of interest passes one of the cameras, it automatically sends out an alert to all of our officers who are logged into the system and lets them know which camera it passed, what time, as well as a snapshot of that vehicle as it passed the camera. So this is calls for service raw data. As the chief mentioned earlier, this is just raw data where calls for service, this is not confirmed reports. This is June to June 22 to June 23. So this is a little bit more updated. So you can see the raw numbers there. The numbers on the left side, CP01 through 08, are our current districts. As you saw in the what Ms. Graves just talked about was redistricting our patrol zones. We currently have 8 districts, which will probably go down to 3, I believe is what has been discussed. But those are the numbers for each district. If you're wondering what 4 is, that is the downtown mall by itself is District 4. So the chief had a heat map in his presentation. This looks very similar to that. This is again 1 year of data, June 22 to June 23. As seen in this map, stolen vehicles are being reported in downtown, West Main, 10th and Grady areas of the city. Then we have a shots fired heat map. This has been updated a little bit, but gun violence in the city is Fifeville, Corner, Cherry, Harris Street areas. More recently, we've had Emmett Street and Angus Road areas of the city, Wayne Avenue, which is our District 5. So a interesting trend, 85% of our shootings involve the use of vehicles. So even if they're not uploaded into that system that we were talking about, officers can back search for suspects. If they have a case in a certain area, they can go back and search for, say, a silver Ford sedan. And what the system does is it hits off of license plates, but it also hits off of front ends using tail lights, headlights, as well as colors of vehicles. It can search things even if you don't have a tag. So say a witness says there was a silver Ford Fusion that the suspect got in and fled the scene of the shooting. Officers can immediately go in and search for a silver Ford Fusion, and it'll pick up any silver Ford Fusion that has passed one of our cameras within the search criteria. Officers can then narrow it down by using other descriptors of the vehicle. Say it's missing a hubcap or it's got a sticker in the window or damage to the left side. We can go down and narrow it down and discard the ones that we don't need. Flashed. So this is a combined shots fired and stolen vehicle map. And on the next slide, I believe we have the deployment map of where our proposed areas are. And it's interesting that I asked our crime analyst to give me these heat maps before he knew where the camera locations were. And he gave me the heat maps and it matched up pretty directly. So on here you have Monticello Avenue coming into the city down at the bottom. You have Long Street at Freebridge going out of the city. You have the 250 bypass at Rugby Avenue. You have Emmett Street going out of the city, kind of in the area of where Cookout is, northbound. You have 10th Northwest at Grady, Preston Avenue at Ridge McIntyre. You have 10th and West Main, 14th and University, and Roosevelt Brown Boulevard, as well as 5th Street at Cherry Avenue, just by the Tonsler tennis courts up at the top of the park. So that's the 10 proposed camera locations at this point. They also match up with heavy traffic flow in and out of the city as well. In the packet, I believe you have our draft policy that will be associated with this. Flock Safety automatically purges all information stored 30 days from capture. That's the industry standard that we're recommending. Policy will need to be implemented to ensure accountability and proper usage of the system. And it's imperative that our reasons for using the systems and our policies are transparent to the community. Part of this process has been having town halls and community meetings with some of the local residents. We've met with Fifeville as well as the Friends of Downtown last week. And we look to have a couple more of those as well as presenting it here tonight. So going back to the policy piece, it kind of falls in line with a lot of the systems our officers already use. We already have access to DMV databases that can run any registration that's in front of us. It pulls up addresses. There's a lot of systems that the officers have the capability of using in furtherance of criminal cases that falls into a policy of if you violate them for a non-legitimate law enforcement reason, it will most certainly end in termination, and we will forward it to the Commonwealth Attorney's Office for consideration for criminal prosecution because it is a crime to do such a thing. All data that is captured is stored for a brief period of time on that local device, meaning the camera. It's quickly moved from that device wirelessly through cell signal to the Flock servers, and it is encrypted from that point on. Flock does not partner with any third parties, so all information captured stays within that system. A lot of LPR companies, there are other companies that do this, that will sell your information, where you're traveling, to certain public entities for marketing reasons. Flock will not do that. It's a fully auditable system, and every user that is on the system has a unique identifier for tracking purposes. We can audit any agency that we provide access to regionally. So if we allow Albemarle County Police to look into our system, we can see who was on that system, why they were running it. It also asks for reasons why you're running certain searches. So if anybody violates it, it's easily tracked, and then we'll have a audit system as well. Periodically, the system administrator will go through and audit searches that have been run. So just some brief summary, it can be a very valuable asset to the department in not only solving crimes after they have occurred, securing a successful prosecution, but also act as a positive deterrent through proper education and media releases. We fully plan to use our social media presence to put these out there, that they're in the communities. And just the knowledge that these cameras are out there have been a deterrent in other localities that have used it. So that's it. Any questions?
Councilors, questions?
If I could real quick just chime in on this two points real quick. So to the last point, some of the jurisdictions, one of the jurisdictions that use this is Norfolk. I want to say have like 70 cameras, and since they've implemented it, they've had a 40% reduction in violent crime. So it's been shown very effective throughout the Commonwealth and throughout the country. The other piece from an accountability standpoint, I have spoken with Inez Gonzalez, the executive director of PCOB, and she would be able to audit this system as well. She would have access to it to ensure that we're using it in the right way, and just that extra level of accountability. So with that, any questions?
Yeah, Chief Koches, what's some of the comments that you received, like when you went to some of the community groups to get input on it?
Can we start it now? I think that's what they said
Oh, I thought you were
at
telling me
Fifeville.
we were on the
No,
start
that's
to
what they.
go. Oh,
No,
yeah.
that's what they were at. Yeah, like.
Yeah.
Yes. Can we start it now? We do. Yes. So have not gotten a few questions just about the data storage. How long and stuff like that. Clearly, obviously, that's
30
I completely
days.
could understand that. Yeah. But I think there's going to be enough checks and balances in place, not just within the police department, but obviously with Ms. Gonzalez.
So is what is stored simply the fact of the number or a photograph of the plate or what?
It's a photograph of the plate. It doesn't take a picture of like the person, and it's not a video, it's a photo. So it's typically either the rear of the vehicle to get the tag or the front of the vehicle to get the tag.
It's like the little camera if you go through the thing.
The toll booth.
Yeah.
Easy Pass.
Yes.
No,
If you go through the Easy Pass,
Express Lanes, it's the same thing.
you get a picture like that.
Or a speed camera, or
And Chief, you mentioned the other day that, what was it that you said? You can't, the police can't ticket someone from a traffic camera?
Right, that's civil, the civil.
Yeah, those
fine.
are, they're civil. So if you say you were to get a ticket from a traffic speed
Yeah,
camera.
but I mean, there's something you told us that essentially.
Was this? Oh, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. You may remember better than me.
Was it the question about like basically if you had like an expired registration?
Oh, yes, yeah, no. That, if the picture were to take a picture of your back, say you're thinking the registration's expired, no, because you're not taking a picture of the driver, so you don't know who was driving the vehicle.
I see.
So just because the tag's expired, you can't just send the owner of the vehicle a ticket.
Okay.
You have to
So
stop, identify the
in
driver.
a way, it disconnects the driver from the car itself and is focused on what that car is up to.
It's correct. It's identifying the tag of the vehicle and what vehicle was on at a specific time and location. It's not identifying the driver at the time.
Maybe this is for Jay, or, does this require a public hearing?
Not that I'm aware of.
No. It doesn't require any action by council at all. It's just a report to us.
I'm thinking that I know you've gotten input, but my gut feeling is that we probably should, I would feel much better about if we had a public hearing. I don't know, that's just kind of where I am. The results are very impressive, particular, you said Norfolk is going down 40%.
Yeah, Norfolk, Alexandria, Arlington, Portsmouth, Harrisonburg, they have a lot more cameras than 10, but yeah.
What other neighborhoods are you mentioned 2 neighborhoods you've spoken to. What other neighborhoods will you go to roll this out that may address your concerns, Vice Mayor, if more localities or neighborhoods are spoken to?
And we plan on going out and speaking to more neighborhoods as well. We're going to continue our outreach on this. It won't stop. But if there's any recommendations either way, it's fine with me.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would definitely agree with the Vice Mayor in terms of erring on the side as much public conversation and awareness as possible, whether that be a public hearing or something else. I don't know what that exact mechanism would be, but I would agree with that point.
Because that's one of the things you've pointed out in your, in your thing here, that you wanted to have community input. You didn't want it to feel punitive, et cetera, and so by talking to more people, even students, your youth group, that will give you some additional input. So while we're on youth, my favorite topic, what feedback did you get from your National Nights Out? Because we had a very large group of people there, and I don't know how you evaluate that. And I don't know which nonprofit it was, but there's one nonprofit coming up, I think, that's doing your gun buyback program. Will those evaluations also go into some of your short-term goals as it relates to stakeholders? No? Yes.
So I'll take it as 2 questions, I
Yes.
guess. So the National Night Out, we got a lot of great feedback from
Okay.
that. I mean, that was just, that really is just an opportunity for law enforcement and the community to get together. It's done throughout the country the same night. And so we got a lot of great feedback. Again, I think it goes to the quotes that we saw from West Haven Day, that the community wants to engage with its police department in the right way. And so we've heard our community loud and clear, and that's what we're going to do. The gun buyback, so early on I received a few requests from a few different nonprofits, and we're still assessing which one to work with to do that. So
Okay. But once that happens, that'll be another form
that'll be one of those, yes.
Another one of those. So now, Misty, how are you engaging students? You spoke about scholarships. increasing your KHIP program, and that probably, KHIP has probably been impacted, because of COVID and, people working, not working, working from home, et cetera. But there are a lot of organizations in Charlottesville that do things with students. I'm involved in a program that does a STEM camp for 1 week at no cost to middle school students in the city and in the county. There are other organizations that have various activities for students at no cost. One of our nonprofits has a very low to no cost membership where they do various activities for students, teen night and things of that nature. So I wouldn't want to see you duplicate things, but maybe there is a way that you could partner in order to expand, so that you would have your collaborations, your partnerships, your stakeholders, whatever, because Mr. Wade shared with me that there are approximately 2,000 nonprofits in the city of Charlottesville, which I found amazing. But a lot of those nonprofits work with students and teens that you are talking about in your presentation. And
So
I just
to-
want to make
to-
sure that
to-
we don't.
We don't want to duplicate either. If there are experts that have dedicated their time and service to creating quality programming for kids, we would much rather support that than having to,
Okay.
again, recreate or create a program.
Okay.
So there's two avenues in which that we're trying to partner with folks. One comes to mind is we did launch early in the summer, right after this group got asked to put together with the Equity Center, is the CVilleALBYouth.com or .org, which is a depository of all the youth programs. So we're working with the Equity Center to continue to add that. That was primarily focused on summer activities that were, low or free, no cost programs, but we're hoping to make that more of a robust thing. So we're working with them to get more of a inventory of those nonprofits that you're talking about, and being able to even take it a step further where parents and kids themselves can click on like interest areas, which ones are offering scholarships, and location and by service that's provided. So that is coming and in the works. We also have the Charlottesville area network dedicated to youth development, Candid. So that's another place where nonprofits come together to talk about what are they seeing as far as trends. If they're already working with kids, what are they saying? So we certainly don't want to put time and resources into, we think kids might like to come to this, and then they don't come to that. So we want to make sure that we ask first what they want to see created. So that's another effort that Candid can take on as well.
Okay.
Could I go back to the piece about Flock? So when you speak, Vice Mayor, about a hearing, I don't know, what do you mean by that? In other words, I don't think by city code or by what, the staff are presenting to us that we've got to have a public hearing per se. Are you just speaking more like, what are we doing to educate or publicize the fact that this is happening? I mean, I'm in support of this. I guess I think that maybe they're wanting to know sort of how we as a body feel about. I am concerned about the civil liberties piece of this, the conversations we've had, and what I've seen tonight. I have a level of comfort with that. I will say with anything like this, if it goes sideways, then it's really hard to fix. So, I trust you and your staff to do what they need to do. But is there more sort of feedback that you're wanting from the community before we, give them the green light, or is it more just like an educational thing?
No, I guess it's all of the above. I think that I'm hearing that it's not required for us, but I think that I would feel a lot better if we get that extra input, because I think that, we have a good pulse what's going on in the community, but maybe we're missing something. And if I'm personally supportive of this, but I want to make sure that this is a big step in my mind, is that I just want to make sure, and I'm encouraged that it's been implemented in other cities, urban cities. I'm comforted in that. So I'm prepared, but before I endorse it, I want to get public, just to have a public hearing, and no one may come, we may not get any input, but I want to be able to say we had it. So that's kind of where I am.
Especially when you're considering that we're trying to build trust. And we talk about building trust. We talk about being transparent. And you, like Councilman Pinkston said, don't want to get it wrong, because you can't, you can't ream it back in. And there's some feelings about your position in your department that are great. And there's some that are in the middle, and there's some that are kind of not so good. And we want to make sure that even if we're not on the same page, maybe we're in the same book, possibly the same chapter.
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
And a little separate from that, still on the flock, the draft policy I don't think was in the council packet. So I would love to just be able to see that, because
We could get that to you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because my one remaining concern, I really do understand the argument. I also understand it could increase the clearance rate with needing fewer potentially dangerous encounters between officers in the community. The civil liberties component is the one thing that, just even inadvertently what could happen. So I would just love to be able to see in writing kind of what are allowable uses, how it happens, punishment for improper usage, what the PCOB's oversight, and so yeah.
Okay, we'll get that to council by tomorrow morning.
Yeah. And let me just add, at the risk of sounding like I'm piling on, when I came on to council 3+ years ago, one of the things that there was a history that I was not aware of that burst on us in about the first month or so, and that was when it became apparent that there had been some cameras placed around West Haven that perhaps the police chief didn't know about, but in any event, she gave an answer that some people regarded as untruthful, and that sort of, even though inadvertently incorrect, in some circles destroyed her credibility in the African American community, in fact. And I think that we want to avoid any possible missteps like that, because it's a sensitive topic.
Absolutely.
If I, to go to non-flock.
Yeah.
I'm curious with the recommendations, kind of what are the next steps? I know there was that 200,000. Is that going to be allocated just internally, or are you looking at like spreading out across multiple projects, going all in on one thing instead, or?
So we would sit down with the manager and talk about priorities and go from there. We would make recommendations to the city manager and go from there.
That is the plan. When Mr. Rogers started this process, I think he was hoping, based on the conversation I participated in, he was hoping that there would be direct recommendations from the committee. In my having conversations with them, it probably is easier for them to make recommendations in regards to areas of focus, opportunities to invest, and I'll take the hit for the decision that gets made as to where the money goes.
Sure. And in short term, it mentioned mentorship. Is that like city program that'll be mentorship, like community groups outside of the city doing mentorship, or?
Human Services does have a mentorship program, but I think it's broader than that. There's a lot of other nonprofits, and I think that provide mentorship, and some of it's formal mentorship and some of it's informal mentorship. And I think just working with folks to raise awareness around the need for mentorship and supporting those organizations that have it by helping to raise awareness around the need for it and where folks can go to get matched.
Yeah. And is it, and maybe this will come as part of the funding recommendation, is there kind of like, what would be the process for beginning to think about implementing the longer term, bigger goals?
I think that comes from the conversation that we're going to need to have, because clearly what's on the list, short and long term, far exceeds 200,000.
Yes.
And
You
that's
think?
that's 200,000 one time. So part of what we'll have to do is figure out what the right strategies are, and more than likely I'll be coming back and asking you for more money. I think that's clear enough based on what we heard tonight.
The proposal that Cities United provided us as far as what comes in their scope of work and what they provide to localities as support as they come here on site at least 6 times over the course of the year, and they speak with stakeholders, and they do an actual like funding assessment of the area and where some source of funding are, depending on what stakeholders are saying rise to the top for a priority. So, and they also leverage their network of other Cities United communities, so that we're sharing information with other folks about how they've invested or been able to get funding. So that's one thing that I'm looking forward to, is how to diversify our funding sources for this work. And that's something that Cities United has offered as part of their consultation package.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions, comments?
Yeah, I'm on a candid mailing list and participating in meetings when I used to could do things like that before I got on council.
Yeah, back in the
But
day.
anyway, it is really a good group, and they have connections and relations throughout the community groups and different groups in the community work with youth. It's really good. So.
Recording
is on.
It's late.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you all. I know it's late, and appreciate all the people that participated on this task force. I think we're going to have to just continue to have these conversations. I realize this is not like a one and done kind of thing, and I appreciate the creativity. I like the fact that this Cities United, whatever.
Cities United.
Yeah, that sounds very promising. And
.org.
so, yeah, thank you.
You're
Yeah.
welcome.
Okay. That finished up that topic? Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there other business items for consideration, councilors? Any questions for the city manager to follow up on?
We have more comments?
Yep. So if not, then we're at the final speaking opportunity for members of the public. Speakers will be given up to 3 minutes. You can join the speaker queue by selecting the raise hand option in the Zoom webinar, by pressing *9 if you're joining by phone, or by raising your hand in council chambers. We will alternate between in-person and virtual speakers. Any speakers here in chambers? Come on up.
Ready when you are.
Oh, we're ready.
Go for it. 3 minutes.
Hello, I'm Natalie Oshrin. I live over by Mead Park. And I was just thinking about the parklet opportunity on West Main from earlier tonight. In your discussions later about what you want to do with the land, I wonder if you'll be able to find out what the potential buyer wants to do with the land. I don't know if that's something that's allowed to weigh in on the consideration, but if it is to be more parking, then obviously I would be against it. But if it was to consolidate land to go towards a conscientious housing project, for example, then I would be more inclined to not have the city stand in the way of that. I am concerned about using past action as a barometer for current and future action. This council has the power to do what previous councils didn't get a chance to do. So while the city might not have done anything with it since the 1970s, that doesn't mean this body can't or shouldn't decide to do something with it. It just seems that, I don't know, maybe no one's tried before. It is not a very large or attractive piece of land, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have potential. So if or when the West Market Streetscape project is revived, it could be a Pleasant Shady Plaza, a bike parking area or bike share area, a bus stop, a small bus quick charging station, public bathroom, or a parklet. It could be any of those things in the meantime. So before the city decides to give it up, consider the power and creativity that you have now to make it useful. Also consider what it would cost for the city to try to acquire that land if it wasn't already ours, as market value is obviously different from assessed value. Again, I don't know what the intent for the land is, and I don't want to stand in the way of a positive private project, but I'm curious if a city brainstorming session could come up with how this land we already have could be useful for the community. Secondarily, separate note, I was heartened to read about the plans for the East High Street sidewalk, and while I support building sidewalks for a sidewalk's sake instead of potentially bogging a sidewalk down into a larger project, I do think this specific street is a great location for including street trees in the design, and I look forward to seeing what the next sidewalk project will be. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone online who'd like to speak to us?
We have Althea Lawson-Worrell.
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
Althea Lawson-Worrell.
Okay.
Hi, good evening. It's Lon Worrell, but that's okay.
Right.
It's spelled funny. So just first to sort of jump off of the information provided by the new chief of police, I think it's interesting that we're talking a lot about teen and youth, but there are a lot of young adults in Charlottesville that are continuing to live here who could also benefit from some community resources, especially when we consider the ages of people who are committing acts of gun violence. And I also think that there's an importance to providing space and community for Black girls in particular, because we tend to have a very large focus on Black boys, but a lot of Black girls are not given the time of day. What I originally came to speak about was to remind the counselors that they will soon have to deal with Chris Henry's special permit for the development of the dairy market. The neighborhoods this will affect the most, those who live right there, do not want this. They're demanding to be heard by you, something which the city has a horrible history with. We will continue to be here. We are not going away. And I hope everybody has a lovely night.
Thank you. Anybody else in the council chambers? No? Okay. Anybody else online?
We have Ziana Bryant.
Ms. Bryant?
Hi, I'm back again. So I agree with all of the things that Ms. Long-Worrell said, but I want to start by saying, of course, we oppose the dairy market expansion as proposed on July 25th. We'll keep saying it and we'll keep reiterating it, so I'll start there. But also, I was happy to see the presentation from Missy Graves and also from the new chief of police about what they plan to do as far as curbing gun violence. And I have a couple of concerns. One being that I went through the KAIT program and I also was a student youth counselor from middle school all the way through graduating high school. I will say that the KAIT program is very representative of a lot of the youth across the city, and especially those who are in the low-income neighborhoods, who are in the kind of traditionally marginalized communities. However, the Youth Council is not as representative. So when we talk about kind of those recommendations that were brought forth from the Youth Council, I want to kind of push the police department and everyone in the city to do a broader job of getting in touch with youth, whether that looks like going into, I mean, I don't really agree with having police in schools, but finding other ways to get youth feedback that doesn't always necessarily have to look like police talking directly to youth, but there are ways to get some of that information. So it's just about comfort of the young people. Additionally, as someone who has been working for a youth serving organization for 2 years now, we define youth as being ages 13 through 25. And while 25 may raise eyebrows and people will be like, oh, that's not necessarily youth, it is important to think about the gap of young adults. So when we're thinking about the gun violence and we're thinking about the issue here, particularly over the past year and a half, I think that there's a real gap for people who are graduating high school, who either who aren't going off to college, who don't necessarily have steady workforce careers or paths, what about those people, and how do we bridge the resources from those who are like young teens who are in middle school and high school to those who have transitioned out of the city schools but who still need support as they transition into, again, a career path or whatever that looks like. So I think, like Althea said, this is an opportunity to focus more on Black girls and other youth in the city. When I was on the youth council, we came up with the position of youth opportunities coordinator, which is now Daniel Fairley's position. However, on the city website, I noticed that his focus is on Black male achievement, which kind of had me wondering, how did we get to that point? Because I remember, again, when we were drafting out that position with Gretchen Ellis at the time, the youth council decided that it would be helpful for all youth to benefit from that position. So as we talk about this kind of youth engagement, community engagement process, I think it's important to go back and look at some of the feedback that was offered years ago for that position and think about how it can be expanded. Is there someone else that needs to work in that role? Is there a community engagement that needs to happen from council's perspective, like from the city manager's office? What needs to happen there, and how can we get other traditionally marginalized youth to feel represented and to feel heard? Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Ms. Bryant. Anybody else online?
Mayor Snook, I see no additional hands.
Okay, then there's nothing further on our agenda.
Just very quickly, just because we've gotten a couple comments about Dairy Market, it's still accurate, the city's received no site plan, correct?
That is correct.
And just wanted to put it out there that until we receive a site plan, it's impossible to even pursue a special use permit. We will certainly let the community know as soon as we receive a site plan, but until one's submitted, they couldn't even pursue a special use permit if they wanted to, so.
And I'll add that I am actually meeting with Chris Henry again this week just to check in and see where things are. As I mentioned, I have an interest in where this is based on community feedback. So the goal would be to keep the conversation moving so that we can seek more engagement.
Thank you. Nothing further to be done. We're adjourned until September 5th. Thanks. We do have a joint work session next week with Planning Commission.
That's correct.
It's on the 29th, isn't it?
Is that right, Brian?
And I'll be there late.
Okay.
It's on the 29th.
29th?
Yes,
That's all right.
I'm there.
You're there for the 29th, the work session with Planning Commission? Yes. Okay, good. So we have a quorum who will be physically present.
No.